The air is warm, not the sharp warmth of midday, but the deep, weighted warmth that gathers in river valleys after the sun has gone, and the stone is giving back everything it borrowed from the light. You are here in this warmth, and the darkness around you is not empty. It is full. It breathes. Somewhere below, the river moves. You cannot see it from where you are lying, settled into a bank of soft fern that has grown undisturbed for longer than the mind can hold, Brom, but you can hear the river's low and patient voice working through the stones of its bed. It does not rush. It has nowhere to be. It has been moving through this valley since before the valley had a name, and it will move through it long after the ferns beneath you have become something else entirely. The sky above is enormous. That is the first thing. There are no lights on the horizon, no orange haze, no distant towers. There is only the sky, vast and scattered with more stars than you have ever seen. Stars that seem close enough to feel, close enough to read by if you knew their language. And perhaps, in some older part of yourself, you do. The Jurassic world does not announce itself. It does not need to. It simply is, surrounding you on all sides, breathing in and out with the slow rhythm of a living thing that has no reason to hurry. The ferns sigh. The river continubengees. Far away, so far away that the sound arrives softer than a thought, something enormous moves through the trees, and then is still again. You are safe here. The night is kind to small things, and you are resting. And the world around you is ancient and indifferent and beautiful, and there is nothing required of you except this, lying here, breathing here, listening as the Jurassic night settles over everything it has ever known. Welcome. Come in from wherever you are, and set down whatever you have been carrying today. You do not need it here. This is a place of ferns and firelight, of warm river air, and the distant sound of something vast and unhurried moving through a world so old it has forgotten what silence felt like before life filled it. This is the Jurassic, and tonight, it belongs to you. If you enjoy listening to sleepy prehistoric dinosaur stories like this, subscribe. New stories arrive each week, and they will be waiting for you when you return, quiet and patient as the ferns. You find yourself in a world that existed approximately 170 million years before the moment you are lying in right now. The arithmetic of that is almost meaningless in the ordinary sense. The numbers are too large for the mind to hold comfortably, and perhaps that is fitting, because the Jurassic does not want to be held. It wants only to be witnessed, slowly, from a position of rest. The supercontinent that once held all the world's land together is breaking apart, slowly and with great geological patience, like a dreamer shifting in sleep. New oceans are opening between what will become the Americas and what will become Africa and Europe. The Atlantic is still a child, narrow and warm, barely a sea yet, but growing. The continents are drifting, though you would never feel the motion standing here. You would only feel the warmth of a world without polar ice, a world where the tropics breathe northward and southward much farther than they will in the age of your own century. The air here is rich, richer than the air you know. Oxygen fills the lungs of everything that lives here, and carbon dioxide wraps the planet in a warmth that keeps the forests enormous and green from coast to coast, from equator to the higher latitudes that would one day become more temperate. There are no frozen poles. There are no permanent deserts of ice. The world breathes green and warm in every direction, and the result is life on a scale that the planet will rarely see again. You are lying in a clearing near a river in what will one day be part of western North America. The Morrison Formation. Geologists will call this layer of stone and sediment millions of years from now, but tonight the Morrison is not a formation. It is a living place. The ferns beneath you are real and present. The river is real. The trees that rise at the edges of this clearing, their trunks wider than most houses, their canopies somewhere far above in the warm dark, are real. And somewhere in the forest beyond the clearing, things are moving. Tonight you will rest here. You will listen as the night sounds gather and settle. You will hear the river and the wind in the upper canopies, and the occasional distant call of something that has no name yet because the people who would give it a name do not exist yet. You will drift, gradually and without effort, into a sleep that is as old as the stone beneath the ferns. And as you do, the Jurassic world will continue around you, as it always has, as it always will, patient and immense and utterly unconcerned with anything so small as urgency. Let your breathing slow. Let the warmth of this ancient air settle into your limbs. The night is long here. There is plenty of time for everything. There is plenty of time for rest. The river is the first thing you learn to trust in this world. Before the trees, before the sky, before the distant sounds that come and go like ideas half-formed in a dreaming mind, the river is constant. It has been running through this valley for longer than any creature alive tonight can remember, and its voice is one of the oldest sounds a living ear will ever hear. There is something in the particular quality of river sound that bypasses the analytical mind entirely and arrives directly in the body as a kind of permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to let things be as they are. Permission to stop organizing experience into categories and simply receive it as it comes. You are close to its bank, close enough that the smell of it reaches you, cool and mineral and green, the smell of moving water that has passed through stone and fern and soft red clay before arriving here. At this bend in its course, where it runs shallow over a broad table of ancient rock and makes a sound like low breathing, like something enormous and calm breathing in the dark. The smell is not unpleasant. It is, in fact, one of the oldest pleasant smells available to a breathing creature, because water and the things that live near water have been part of the successful life story since the very beginning of the chapter that contained the first air breather. Your body knows this smell. Your body has always known this smell. The bank itself is a place of extraordinary texture. Here, just at the edge of where the land commits itself to the water, the soil is soft and dark, built from centuries of deposited silt that the river leaves behind each time it rises and retreats. Ferns grow in this soil in dense, overlapping curtains, their fronds reaching out over the water as if trying to touch the reflection of the stars. You can feel the coolness radiating up from the damp earth, a coolness that is different from the warmth of the open air, more intimate, more subterranean, the kind of cool that makes the warmth above it feel more generous by contrast. The contrast between the cool soil beneath and the warm air above creates a small world of its own, a microclimate within the larger climate, a gentle temperature gradient that the body navigates without thinking about it, finding the exact position where the two temperatures meet and settling there. Sit with the river for a moment. You do not need to look at it directly. Simply listen. The sound it makes over the flat rock is not the rushing sound of rapids, not the dramatic sound of a waterfall, but something quieter and more rhythmic, a steady, unbroken percussion of water against stone, water against water, the gentle percussion of a world that has no reason to perform for anyone. The river does not know you are here. The river does not need to know. It simply continues, as it has been continuing since long before any ear existed in this valley to receive the sound it makes. What moves in the river at night is another matter entirely from what moves in it by day. In the shallower reaches, where the water runs clear over white gravel, you can see the shadows of small creatures working the current. Fish, though not quite the fish you would recognize. Their bodies are elongated and pale-bellied, built for a stream's slower logic, and they hold their position in the flow with small adjustments of their tails that never quite resolve into stillness. They are perpetually in the act of not being carried away. This is not a dramatic act. It requires no evident effort. It is simply the state in which these creatures exist, in constant, effortless engagement with a force that would move them if they let it. There are larger things in the deeper pools. You cannot see them, but you know they are there the way you know things in the night, not by sight but by the displacement of sound, the brief disruption in the river's rhythm, the way the water noise changes slightly when something beneath its surface shifts its weight. A long-bodied creature rolls in the deep pool around the bend. A crocodilian, perhaps, one of the ancient lineages that will outlast the dinosaurs and persist into your own time barely changed, because they discovered a design for survival so efficient that the planet itself would never find reason to revise it. The crocodilian in its deep pool is among the most ancient of successful experiments. It found what worked and it stayed with what worked, and the world rewarded that faithfulness with persistence. The crocodilian does not surface. It simply moves, slow and deliberate, in the cold dark of the pool, and the river adjusts around it, and then the sound returns to what it was, and everything is as it was, and you breathe again without noticing you had stopped. Fireflies, or something close to what fireflies will one day become, drift above the fern bank on the far side of the river. They move in long, unhurried arcs, their light the particular yellow-green of something that has never needed to be brighter than the thing it has always been. There are dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. They organize themselves without organization into soft, shifting constellations that mirror nothing and yet seem to mean something. The way all beautiful things seem to mean something when you are quiet enough to look at them without wanting anything from them. The light they make is cold light. It produces no heat. It is simply the visible byproduct of a chemical reaction that the creature's body has been performing since long before there were eyes in this world to see it. The night insects are singing. You did not notice when they started, because they did not start exactly. They were simply there, the way the river was there, part of the fundamental sound of the world, and your attention arrives at them the way it arrives at your own breath when you finally pay attention to it. Already present, already ancient, already continuous. The insect voices rise and fall in waves that have no particular structure but create one anyway, through sheer accumulated patience. A rhythm emerges, a pulse, something your own nervous system responds to without being asked. This is the river at night. This is the edge of the water where the Jurassic world breathes most openly, where the barrier between what is alive and what is merely mineral becomes most permeable, where the stone and the fern, and the crocodilian in the deep pool, and the fireflies above the bank, and the fish holding themselves against the current, all participate in the same slow, enormous conversation that has been going on since the first warm rain fell on the first bare rock, and the first microorganism found the junction of water and mineral, and thought, in whatever way a microorganism thinks, that this was a place it might stay. You are part of this conversation tonight, not as a speaker, as a listener. And the night goes on around you, patient and indifferent and kind, and the river continues to say the one thing it has always been saying, and the ferns sigh slightly in the air that moves down from the forest, and you are very nearly asleep already, and that is exactly right, and there is nothing else required of you, and the night is long, and the night is warm, and the Jurassic world is just beginning. There is something specific about this hour, the hour just after the last light has fully gone, and before the moon has climbed high enough to matter, that belongs to no one, not to the hunters, not to the hunted. It is an interval of pure existing, when the creatures of the day have settled and the true night animals are not yet fully committed to their business, and the world holds itself in a breath between actions. This interval does not last long, perhaps an hour, perhaps less. But while it lasts, it has a quality that is not available at any other point in the day's cycle, a quality of suspension, of the world briefly undecided about what it is going to be next. You inhabit this breath. You are perfectly placed within it, settled into the fern bank with the river below you, and the warm air above and the enormous trees at your back, and there is a quality to this moment that your body recognizes, even if your mind is still trying to classify it. The quality of safety, the quality of a place that does not require anything from you, the quality of rest that is not merely the absence of work but the actual presence of something else, some older and more fundamental state, the state from which all other states emerge, and to which they all eventually return. The river says this. The fireflies say this. The insects say this in their patient, cycling voices. The crocodilian in the deep pool rolling slowly in the dark says this without meaning to. Everything here is in some essential agreement about the nature of the night, and you are being included in that agreement simply by lying here, simply by breathing, simply by letting the warmth settle into you, like the warmth that settles into stone when the day has been long and generous with its light. Let the river continue. Let the fireflies continue. Let the insects go on with what they have always been doing. You do not need to attend to any of it specifically. You need only be here, present, breathing, part of the warm dark, part of the ancient and ongoing conversation, while the night moves around you as steadily and unhurriedly as the river itself moves through its stone and its fern and its deep, patient pools. Somewhere upstream, a small splash, then nothing. The river adjusts, the insects continue, the night breathes on, and the fern beneath your back is soft, and the air above your face is warm, and there is no requirement here, no obligation, no urgency, no clock that the night is keeping. There is only the sound of the water over the stone, and the slow arcs of the fireflies, and the insects in their continuous ancient chorus, and the dark that is not empty but full of everything that has been living in this valley for longer than you can hold in your mind. All of it here, all of it present, all of it entirely at rest, in its own way of being. The moon is rising somewhere behind the eastern ridgeline, not visible yet, but its approach is registered in the sky above the valley as a slight brightening, a preliminary silvering of the clouds that have gathered at the ridge's edge. The river will catch that moonlight when the moon clears the ridge, and the fireflies will dim slightly against the competition of the lunar glow, and the valley will shift into a different version of its nighttime self. But that is still some time away. For now, the night is dark and patient and complete, and the river is below, and the stars are above, and you are here, resting, in the most ancient and fundamental way that any living thing has ever rested. Beyond the fern bank, the forest begins. Not abruptly, the way forests in later ages will begin at the boundary of cleared land, a clean line between open and enclosed. Here the forest begins gradually, the way a thought begins. First a general sense of it, a darkening, a softening of sound, a change in the quality of the air, and then before you have quite decided when it started, you are within it. This gradual quality is one of the forest's oldest and most generous gifts. It does not demand that you commit to entering it. It simply surrounds you, incrementally, until surrounding is simply what it is doing, and you are inside without having chosen to cross any particular threshold. The floor of the Jurassic forest is a world beneath the world. The canopy is so far above that on cloudy days the treetops disappear into grey, and even on clear days like tonight they are simply a rumour of leaves, a distant green ceiling that the moon is slowly silvering from above, while the floor remains in its own, more intimate darkness. Down here, the light that reaches the ground has been filtered through so many layers of leaf and branch that by the time it arrives it is merely a suggestion, a memory of light, a light that illuminates nothing and yet makes everything feel slightly less dark than complete dark would feel. The trees themselves are not the trees you know. The most common here are conifers of ancient design, their trunks rising in almost perfect columns, their bark deeply furrowed in long vertical channels that collect moisture and moss and the pale threads of fungi. These trunks are enormous. The largest ones have diameters wide enough that you could walk around the base for several seconds before completing a circuit. Their roots extend outward across the forest floor in great searching arches, rising and descending over the soil like the backs of something that moves too slowly for any individual lifetime to perceive the motion. These roots do not merely anchor the tree. They are the tree's engagement with the world beneath the surface, its participation in the chemical conversations of the underground, its fingers in the living soil. Between the great conifers grow the cycads. These are older even than the conifers, older in their design, plants that carry within their architecture a kind of primordial stubbornness, a refusal to be improved upon. They stand at heights between knee and shoulder, their thick, palm-like trunks topped with crowns of long, stiff fronds that radiate outward in perfect geometric patience. At the centre of some of these crowns, a seed cone is forming, dense and heavy, the colour of old clay, and it exudes a faint, slightly resinous scent that hangs in the still air of the understory like something placed there deliberately. The cycads are perhaps the most patient plants in this world, and this world contains some extremely patient plants. They have been waiting, in their evolutionary sense, for longer than most of what surrounds them. You can smell the forest floor itself. It is the most complex smell you have ever encountered, not in the sense of being difficult to pass, but in the sense of being inexhaustible. Every layer of decomposing leaf, every thread of fungal mycelium working through the dark soil, every particle of mineral earth and accumulated organic matter contributes something to the composite smell that is this place. It is sweet in places and earthy in others, and in certain spots, near the base of the older trees where the root systems have broken down generations of organic matter into their most fundamental forms, it is something that goes beyond smell entirely and becomes almost a taste, a dark and nutrient-dense taste that speaks directly to some very old part of the body's intelligence. There is no manufactured equivalent to this smell. It cannot be reproduced or synthesized or put in a bottle. It exists only here, only in this specific forest floor, only in the particular combination of living and dying and decomposing that makes this place what it is. The fungi are doing their invisible work. You cannot see it, but you are walking through a network of extraordinary complexity. Beneath the soil, the mycelial threads of dozens of species of fungi extend in all directions, connecting the roots of the conifers to each other, connecting the cycads to the ferns to the microorganisms in the decomposing bark, creating a system of chemical communication and resource transfer that will not be discovered or described for tens of millions of years, but that is functioning right now, passing sugars and minerals and information in the language of chemistry through the dark earth, keeping the forest informed about itself. The forest knows things, not in the way a mind knows things, in the way a network knows things, distributed and simultaneous and without a center. What moves on the forest floor at night is small and quick. The large animals, when they pass through here, leave evidence of their passage. A pressed fern, a broken branch at some height that speaks of a body taller than you are, a place where the soil has been disturbed by a footprint so large that a person lying down in it would fit, curled, with room to spare. But the large animals are elsewhere tonight, at least for now. The forest floor belongs to the small ones, to the creatures that live their entire existences within the vertical range between the soil surface and knee height, the creatures for whom the great trunks of the conifers are landmarks rather than obstacles, for whom the cycad crowns overhead are the equivalent of the sky. There are lizard-like creatures moving in the roots of the great conifers, small, quick-bodied things with eyes that catch what little light filters down and return it briefly as two small amber points before vanishing into shadow. They are hunting the insects that gather in the bark fissures, and they hunt with a patience and precision that makes their smallness irrelevant. A long tongue. A stillness so complete it becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding stillness. And then, so quickly the motion barely registers, the strike. Something is consumed. The lizard-like creature resettles itself and becomes still again, as though the strike never happened, as though it has been sitting motionless in this exact position since the Jurassic began, and will continue to sit here until the Jurassic ends, interrupted only by the occasional moment of lightning-fast consumption. Beetles the size of a child's fist move slowly across the forest floor, their armoured backs barely catching the dim light, their legs working in that ancient hexapod rhythm that will not substantially change for the rest of the planet's biological history. They are magnificent in their unhurriedness. These beetles, moving with the confidence of something that has never needed to hurry because its design has always been exactly sufficient for what the world demands of it. A beetle does not second-guess its beetleness. A beetle is, at every moment, entirely committed to being a beetle, and the commitment carries with it a dignity that is worth noticing. You might wonder, lying here in the dark forest, what it is that makes the Jurassic feel so different from the world you know. It is not primarily the dinosaurs, though they are here, and they are extraordinary. It is something more fundamental than that. It is the sense of time moving at a different speed. Not slower, exactly, and not faster. Simply different. As though the pace at which things change has been calibrated to a longer interval, as though the unit of meaningful time here is not a year or a decade but a millennium, and within a millennium things shift and adjust and evolve in ways that would be invisible to any single lifetime, but are immense when viewed across the full span of the Jurassic's presence on the planet. You can feel this different pace even in the quality of the air. The air here carries no impatience. There are no deadlines in the Jurassic. There are seasons, yes, and years, and the long, slow grinding of geological time, but none of it is organized around urgency the way your world is organized. The trees grow as fast as trees have always grown, which is to say very slowly, and the fungi work as fast as fungi work, which is somewhere between invisible and imperceptible, and the river outside the forest carries water downhill to the sea at a speed that cannot be hurried, because it has never been hurried, and does not know what hurry means. This is one of the deepest gifts the Jurassic offers you tonight. The permission to exist at a pace that is not organized around what comes next. You are here, in the forest, in the warm dark, with the beetles moving through the leaves and the lizard-like creatures hunting in the roots, and the mycelium working its patient chemistry underground. None of it needs you to do anything. None of it requires your participation, or your understanding, or your approval. You are simply here. And that is sufficient, and the forest neither notices nor requires your presence, which is the most restful kind of company the natural world knows how to offer. The wind in the upper canopy produces a sound that reaches the forest floor as a kind of white noise, a vast and sourceless murmur that seems to come from everywhere at once and nowhere specific. It is the sound of the forest breathing. It is the sound of 10,000 leaves turning slightly in the same air, each of them catching and releasing the wind in a slightly different way. all of them together creating something greater than the sum of their individual motion. You can feel it here, on the floor, as the faintest breath of movement in the still air, a periodic reminder that the atmosphere is never entirely still, that even in the deepest calm something is always flowing somewhere, being moved from where it was to where it will be, in the patient and ceaseless circulation that keeps the world alive. Close your eyes for a moment, or keep them open. It makes little difference in this light. Let the forest floor present itself to you through your other senses. The smell of it, layered and complex and endlessly generous. The sound of it, layered and complex in the same way but in a different dimension. The feel of the cool earth beneath you, the slight give of the accumulated leaf matter, the firmness of the root arching beneath your lower back, pressing gently but not uncomfortably, a reminder of the tree above and the system it is part of. The warmth of the air that drifts down from the canopy, slightly warmer than the earth, carrying the specific warmth of things that have been absorbing sunlight all day and are now gently releasing it. This is the forest floor. This is where the small and patient things live out their lives in a scale that asks nothing of magnitude and offers everything of precision. And somewhere above, in the canopy, the moon is moving through its long arc, and the stars are turning, and the world is very old, and you are part of it. In this hour, in this warmth, in this darkness that is not empty, but full, something moves between two of the great root arches, moving low and quick, too quick to see clearly. But the movement is purposeful and unbothered, the movement of something that knows exactly where it is going and has no reason to hesitate. And then it is gone, back into the dark of the roots, and the forest floor returns to what it was before, which is to say, completely itself, as it has always been, as it will always be, through the long hours of the Jurassic night, through the long arc of geological time, through everything that comes before and after, always and completely, and without apology itself. Let the forest hold you in the way that forests hold everything they contain, not gripping, not claiming, simply surrounding, as they have always surrounded things, as they will always surround things, with the same patient and comprehensive generosity they have brought to every creature that has ever rested within their boundaries. The forest floor is soft beneath you. The tree above you has been here since before you arrived, and will be here long after you have gone. The fungi are working in the dark soil. The beetles are crossing their territories. The lizards are hunting in the roots. Everything is doing what it does, here, in the warm and patient dark. If you are drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. The hours before dawn are different from the hours of the deep night. Something shifts in the quality of the dark itself, as though the dark has become conscious of its own ending, and has grown slightly more deliberate, slightly more intentional, in the way it holds itself over the world. The insects notice this shift. Their voices, which have maintained the same steady pulse since full dark settled, begin to modulate in ways too subtle to describe, but not too subtle to feel. Something changes in the rhythm, not faster or slower, just different, slightly charged. This is the hour when the hunters of the Jurassic are most fully alive. Not the great sauropods, those enormous and gentle processes of vegetation that move through the world like slow weather. Not the night insects and the crocodilians in their river pools. The hunters that belong to this hour are the ones built for calculation, the ones whose eyes have adapted, over longer spans of time than consciousness can comfortably hold, to the particular quality of light that exists in the last hours of the dark. The ones whose nervous systems pulse with an efficiency that will not be fully understood until a time so far from now that the mathematics required to span the distance does not yet exist. You become aware of them gradually. Not by seeing them, the light is still too limited for that, but by the change in the behavior of the things you can see. The beetles on the forest floor pause in their slow crossings. The lizard-like creatures in the root systems grow still with a quality of stillness different from their hunting stillness. This is not the composed, calculating stillness of a predator waiting to strike. This is the compressed, breath-held stillness of something that has just received information about its own position in the hierarchy of this moment. A sound. Directly ahead of you, between two cycads at the edge of the clearing. Not a loud sound, almost the opposite of a loud sound. A soft displacement of air, a brief rearrangement of the fern fronds, a sound that lasts less than a second and carries within it more information than you know how to decode. But your body decodes it anyway, in the way bodies have always decoded sounds in the dark, automatically and without translation, arriving at an understanding that lives below language but above uncertainty. Something is here. Something with size and purpose. Something that is, in its way, working. The small theropod that has entered the clearing from the forest side moves on two legs, its body held horizontal, its tail extended behind it as a counterbalance that allows the forward weight of its head and neck to remain suspended without muscular effort. It is perhaps 1.5 meters from nose to tail. Not large, not in a world that also contains animals that would dwarf a house. But the quality of its movement is extraordinary. Each foot placement is deliberate and almost completely silent, as though the ground beneath it is being addressed rather than simply stepped upon. Its head moves in small, precise arcs, scanning. The eyes are large for the size of the skull, positioned to provide the maximum binocular vision the face geometry can support, and in the dim light before dawn they catch something that your own eyes do not. The specific pattern of thermal and movement information that the Jurassic air carries for those equipped to read it. The small theropod reads this information constantly, automatically, in the way you read a familiar language, without effort, without translating, directly into meaning. It stops at the center of the clearing, completely still for a moment that stretches. Its breath moves its sides very slightly. Its eyes continue their small scanning arcs. And then, from somewhere in the direction of the river, another sound. A splash, larger than the fish sounds you have been hearing, and the small theropod's head swings instantly in that direction, locked, listening with its whole body. What happens next is the thing that is hardest to describe about Jurassic predators, the thing that no amount of articulate explanation quite captures. They wait without impatience. They are built for waiting in a way that human patience, which is always working against an internal timer, an awareness of time passing, cannot fully replicate. The small theropod waiting at the center of the clearing is not enduring the wait. It is not wishing the wait were shorter. It is simply in the wait, as fully present in the wait as it will be in whatever the wait becomes. And the wait itself is not a lesser state than action, but simply another state, one that carries its own kind of fullness. You watch it from the fern bank and feel something that is not quite fear, and not quite awe, and not quite recognition, but that contains elements of all three. There is a quality to this creature's existence that is so purely functional, so completely aligned with what it is and what it does and what the world requires of it, that it generates a kind of beauty the way a mathematical proof generates beauty. Not the beauty of decoration or ornament, the beauty of the thing that is exactly itself and nothing else. A microhook slips into your thoughts here, not as tension but as gentle curiosity. Somewhere just beyond the tree line, something much larger is also awake. What does it want? And will the small hunter know when to yield the clearing? The small theropod detects the larger movement before you do, a change in its posture, subtle but unmistakable, a slight lowering of the horizontal body, a shift in the position of the tail, not fear, more like acknowledgement. The recalibration of a creature that understands its own place in the hierarchy of this particular moment with absolute clarity and without anything resembling resentment. The larger animal does not enter the clearing. It moves parallel to its edge, on the forest side, and its footsteps reach you through the ground before they reach you through the air. A rhythm of deep compression, regular and unhurried. The footsteps of something that has no reason to move quietly because it has no reason to be afraid of anything that lives in this forest. The vegetation at the clearing's edge moves in a long sequential wave as it passes, frond after frond displaced and returning, like a ripple in slow motion, and then it is past. The footsteps continue down the valley, growing quieter, not abruptly, but in the way that distance makes things quieter, gradually and without drama, until they are only a vibration you feel in the earth beneath you, rather than a sound you hear in the air around you. And then that too is gone. The small theropod at the center of the clearing straightens, resumes its scanning arcs, moves toward the riverbank with 3 quick, silent steps and pauses there, looking at the water. A fish, disturbed by something, breaks the surface briefly. The theropod watches the ripple spread and diminish, watches the surface return to its mirror stillness, watches the stars reflected in that stillness, though it has no concept of stars, only the patterns of light and dark that the sky provides. And these are simply more data in the continuous reading of the world that is its life. There are others of its kind. You cannot see them, but you know they are there, in the forest on both sides of the valley, moving in the same pre-dawn hour, with the same deliberate quiet, each pursuing the particular calculation of need and opportunity that the night has organized for each of them. They do not coordinate. They do not need to. The forest is large enough that their territories do not overlap in a way that would require negotiation, and the night provides enough abundance that none of them is competing with another in this moment for the same resource. The theropod at the river's edge makes a decision. It wades into the shallows, 1 step, 2 steps, until the water is at its knees and stands there motionless, watching the current. And the river, which has been doing this since long before the theropod existed and will do it long after, simply continues, carrying its small cargo of minerals and organic matter and reflected starlight down toward the sea, patient as the earth itself, which is to say infinitely, which is to say without any concept of the word at all. Let the hunter work, let the river flow, let the dark hold its last hour over the valley with its customary thoroughness. You do not need to follow any of it. You need only be here, warm in the fern bank, listening to the Jurassic night do what it has always done in this hour before the light returns. Settling, shifting, preparing, in its patient, geological way, for the next thing. The small theropod at the river's edge stands for a long time, not paralyzed, not uncertain, simply still, in the way that creatures are still, when stillness is the exact right response to the information the environment is providing. You watch it from the fern bank and find that your own body is responding to its stillness, becoming quieter, settling deeper into the ferns, allowing your weight to distribute more evenly across the soft bank. Something about the quality of this animal's attention invites a corresponding attention, not the tense and effortful attention of someone trying to notice something, but the open and receptive attention of something that has temporarily stopped managing itself and is simply receiving. The hunter's eyes are extraordinary in this pre-dawn light. They are positioned far enough forward on the skull to provide binocular vision in the crucial forward arc, the arc that matters for distance estimation, for the calculation of how far the prey is and how quickly it is moving and where it will be by the time the strike arrives. Eyes positioned this way are a significant evolutionary investment. They sacrifice the wide-angle peripheral vision that side-positioned eyes provide, the panoramic awareness of prey animals that need to see everything on all sides at once. They trade that panoramic awareness for depth, for precision, for the ability to place an action exactly in the space where it needs to be placed. Consider what precision means in this world, not the precision of instruments or measurements, which belong to later ages. 2. The biological precision of a body that has been refined for millions of years toward the performance of one specific action. The small theropod at the river's edge is the accumulated product of every ancestor that struck at a target and missed and failed to eat, and every ancestor that struck and connected and survived and reproduced. The successful ones passed forward the geometry of their skulls, the chemistry of their muscles, the neural wiring of their reflexes. The unsuccessful ones became part of the record of what doesn't work, written not in stone but in absence. What remains is precision. What you are watching, in this pre-dawn, is not an individual animal. It is the current expression of a very long conversation about how to do one thing exactly right. The sound of the river changes slightly. Something has entered the shallows downstream, something of moderate size, making the particular sound that wading makes when the water is shallow enough to splash, and the animal is heavy enough to make the splash matter. The theropod's head swings toward the sound without any other part of its body moving. This is one of the qualities of the more derived theropods that will eventually be the most important quality of their descendants, the ability to move the head independently of the body. The neck has become what the ancestors' necks were not, a flexible and independent instrument of sensory deployment, able to point the eyes and the nostrils and the ears in any direction without committing the body to that direction, without surrendering the efficiency of the current stance. The pre-dawn quality of the air is specific and worth attending to. It carries the lowest temperature of the night, the accumulated coolness of all the hours since sunset, radiating from the stone and the soil and the still pools of water into an atmosphere that has been releasing its own heat for hours, and is now at its most receptive to what the ground is giving up. This coolness is not uncomfortable. It has a clarity to it that the warmer hours lack. Sounds carry differently in this cool air, travelling farther and arriving with less attenuation, which is part of why the pre-dawn world seems acoustically richer than the late evening world. Why sounds that were present all night seem louder and more specific in these last hours before the light. The hunting small theropod eventually makes its decision. It wades slightly deeper into the shallows, and then in a movement too fast to track completely, it strikes at something in the water that you could not have identified from your position on the bank. The strike is total and decisive and over before it began. Something is caught. Something is consumed. The animal returns to the bank and stands there for a moment, the muscles of its jaw working in the sequence they always work in, after a successful strike, and then it lifts its head, and the jaw stills, and the head sweeps back into its scanning arc. The meal is done. The scanning continues. The night does what it always does after any event, which is to resume itself exactly as it was before the event occurred. You realize you have been watching this for some time without any sense of the time passing. This is another of the gifts that the Jurassic night offers to those patient enough to settle into it. The ordinary markers of time become irrelevant. You are not checking anything. You are not measuring intervals. You are simply in this time, which does not feel like duration but like presence, the unqualified presence of a world that is entirely committed to being what it is, in every direction, at every moment, without reservation or commentary. The pre-dawn sky above the valley has begun its first barely perceptible brightening. Not in the east specifically. Not yet. More in the general tone of the black above, which has acquired a quality that is almost indistinguishable from what it was an hour ago, but that the body registers as change, as direction, as the distant approach of something that is not yet here but is on its way. The small theropod has registered this too. Its behaviour subtly shifts, the scanning becoming slightly more oriented in certain directions, the body's posture carrying a different quality of readiness than it carried at the deepest point of the night. The pre-dawn is the hour of maximum alertness for many of the Jurassic's hunters. The evidence suggests this because the evidence of the bones and the trackways and the nitrogen isotopes in the fossilized material suggest that these animals were endothermic, warm-blooded in the sense of generating their own body heat, which means they were not constrained by temperature the way the cold-blooded reptiles of popular imagination are constrained. They could be fully operational in the cool of the pre-dawn, running the full capacity of their nervous systems, their muscles warm and responsive, their senses acute. The pre-dawn was not a limitation for them. It was an opportunity. Rest now. The pre-dawn is doing its work around you without requiring your active participation in it. The small theropod will continue its hunting or it will not. The river will continue its conversation with the stone. The air will continue its patient preparation for the return of the light. All of it will continue whether you are watching or resting, whether you are attending or drifting, whether you are in the world or halfway into the warm dark of sleep. The Jurassic is large enough to continue without you, and that is, again, the most restful thing about it. The light comes back to the Jurassic the way it comes back to every world that has a sky, gradually, from the east, beginning as a slight brightening of the darkness above the distant ridgeline that is less like illumination and more like the darkness becoming transparent in one direction. You notice it first not as light but as the ability to see shapes that were, moments before, inferred rather than observed. The outline of the great conifers against the sky, the curve of the river where it bends below you, the flat, stone-grey surface of the water, which was black a short time ago and is now becoming something more specific. And then, from the direction of the trees, a sound that you feel before you hear it. A sound that travels through the earth before it arrives in the air. A deep, rhythmic compression, once every 2 or 3 seconds, steady and patient and large beyond any easy comparison. The kind of footsteps that make the ground remember that it is, at its core, a dynamic thing, capable of movement, capable of response, capable of being affected by something that moves across its surface. They come out of the trees at the far bend of the river, where the bank is lower and the access to the water easier for very large things. 3 of them, though you will need the growing light to confirm the number because at first they are simply a mass of movement and sound. They are sauropods, members of the long-necked lineage that has, through the patient accumulation of geological time, I arrived at the conclusion that the most efficient way to gather enough plant material to fuel a body of this size is to deploy a neck long enough to sweep a wide arc of forest canopy without moving the body that powers it. You watch them come to the water, and something in you goes quiet in a way that is different from the quietness of sleep. It is the quietness of witness. The particular stillness that arrives when something so fundamentally different from the ordinary scale of experience presents itself that the ordinary instruments of comprehension temporarily yield. These animals are not merely large. They are large in a way that reorganizes the space around them. They are large in a way that makes the trees, which you have been thinking of as enormous, appear merely medium. They are large in a way that makes the landscape seem, for a moment, differently configured, as though the world has quietly shifted its proportions to accommodate what has just entered it. The nearest one reaches the water's edge and lowers its head. The neck, which stretches over you in the growing light at an angle that seems to operate outside the usual logic of anatomy, descends the 5 or 6 meters from the shoulder height to the water surface in a long, unhurried curve. But the neck is not rigid. It is not a crane or a mechanical arm. It is alive in the way that long things that carry fluid within them are alive, slightly swaying, slightly responsive to the animal's weight distribution, carrying within its curve a quality of what you can only describe as ease. The ease of a structure that is doing exactly what it was made to do. The sound of the sauropod drinking is not what you might expect. It is quieter, or rather it is different from the sound of drinking as you know it. The animal takes water in long, sustained draws, and the sound it makes is more like the sound of a river changing direction slightly than the sound of something consuming something else. It is the sound of transfer, the sound of the world's water moving from one of its many temporary locations to another. While it drinks, the animal's eyes move, not quickly. The eyes of a sauropod move with the same stately patience that characterizes everything else about it. They are small eyes for the size of the skull, set high on the head, and they see in a way that is almost certainly different from the way you see. Less detail, perhaps, or different detail, more sensitivity to motion, more reliance on peripheral information. But they see. And as this animal stands at the water's edge in the first grey light of the Jurassic morning, its eyes move across the landscape with what can only be described as awareness. Not intelligence in any specific sense, simply awareness. The consciousness that is exactly adequate to the life that is being lived. The second sauropod has waded into the river. The water at its chest is still shallow by the measure of its body, reaching only to the underside of the rib cage, but the river responds to its presence with a visible displacement, a wave that radiates outward and breaks against the far bank with enough force to disturb the ferns there. The animal stands in the current as though the current were simply another kind of ground. Fluid ground that moves around the facts of its body without asking anything of it. It begins to drink, and the river, which has been doing what rivers do since long before sauropods existed, continues to do what rivers do, flowing around and through and past, unchanged in its essential project by the presence of something enormous standing in it. What might cause you to wonder, watching these animals in the first light, is not their size but their calm. Here is something interesting to carry into sleep with you. These are among the largest land animals that have ever existed on this planet, larger by most measures than anything before or since, and their relationship with the world around them is characterized above all else by unhurriedness. They do not rush. They do not compete for the river when the river is wide enough for all of them. They do not display or posture or make the sort of demonstrations of dominance that smaller, more anxious creatures sometimes make. They drink, they stand in the water, they breathe. One of them, the largest, which is standing on the bank eating the leaves from the lower branches of a tree at the forest edge, takes a long, slow step that repositions its weight from one pair of legs to another, and the ground responds with that deep compression, that travelling vibration you felt before as sound, and now feel beneath you as a gentle pressure through the fern bank, as though the earth were breathing. In a way, it is. The earth and these animals have been in conversation for so long that the distinction between the geological and the biological has become partly philosophical in this world. The sauropods graze the forest. Their grazing shapes the forest. Their bodies, when they die, return to the earth and feed what grows from the earth and will one day be grazed by their descendants. The conversation is circular. It has no beginning or end. The light is growing now, slowly but with a kind of inevitability that is distinct from urgency. The grey above the eastern ridgeline is becoming gold at its lower edge. The river's surface, which was grey a few moments ago, has become silver, and the silver is beginning to pick up the first pale colour of the sky. The sauropods are visible in detail now. The texture of their skin, which is not the smooth skin of popular imagination but something rougher and more complex, thickened in places, with small scale-like structures that catch the growing light in patterns that shift as the animals move. The way their enormous tails move very slightly, always very slightly, as though even in the stillness of standing and drinking the body is making small adjustments to its own balance. A bird, or something that is working toward the design of what birds will eventually be, calls from the top of one of the great conifers, once, clear and high, with the quality of a sound that is still discovering what it wants to be, and then silence, and then again, once more, from a different tree, as though the first call had been a question and the second was its answer, though they came from two different throats. The sauropods do not respond to the bird call. They are not, in this moment, responding to much of anything except the river and the forest and the slow arithmetic of their own enormous hungers. But the call is part of the morning as much as they are, Eumenis, and the morning is part of the world as much as anything else, and you are lying here witnessing all of it. The giants and the bird call and the growing light and the river, which has not paused once in all of this, not for a moment, flowing on as it has always flowed, toward the sea it has always been flowing toward. You could watch this for a long time. You could watch it for so long that the sauropods become, in their familiarity, simply part of the landscape, part of what this river valley is. And perhaps that is the thing about them that most clearly speaks to something deep in the body's understanding of the world. They have been here so long, and they are so fully part of what this place is, that to see them is not to see something exotic or strange, but to see the landscape making itself visible in one of its forms. They are the forest, in a way. They are the river. They are the Jurassic morning, made large and slow and patient and calm. Rest now. Let the giants drink. The morning is coming, but it is coming slowly, as mornings here always do, without ambition, simply brightening, simply moving through the same arc it has always moved through, over a world that receives it with the same unhurried acceptance it receives everything. The sauropods will drink and then return to the forest. The river will continue. The bird call will happen once more, and then not again for a while, and you will be here, in the fern bank, in the warm and growing light, resting. The sauropods at the water's edge are engaged in an act so fundamental that it predates the dinosaurs, predates the vertebrates, predates almost everything except the chemistry of life itself. They are taking the world's water into their bodies, the water that is currently in the river, which was in the clouds before that, and in the ocean before that, and in the river before that in an endless cycling, is being taken up by these animals and incorporated temporarily into the enormous hydraulic systems of their bodies. Their blood, their lymph, the fluid in their cells, all of it is the world's water reorganized by biology into something that carries oxygen and nutrients, and the chemical signals that allow a body this large to coordinate its activities. The sound of drinking, at this scale, is a sound worth remembering. It is not the small, discrete sound of a creature drinking from a cup or a pool. It is a sound with volume and texture and duration, the sound of large quantities of water being moved from a river into a body that requires large quantities of water to sustain itself. The river is briefly louder near the sauropods, disturbed by the pressure differential of their drinking, the water rushing slightly toward the void created by each long draw, and then the draw ends, and the water redistributes, and the river's surface returns to its ordinary motion, and the sound returns to ordinary river sound. What is a sauropod neck? This is a question worth carrying into the growing light. It is not simply a long neck in the way that a giraffe's neck is a long neck. The giraffe's neck achieves its length through the elongation of the same number of vertebrae that most mammals have, 7, each vertebra stretched to a length that the anatomy barely sustains. The sauropod's neck achieves its extraordinary length through multiplication and elimperation, more vertebrae and larger ones, and vertebrae that have been hollowed out by the air sac system that runs through the spine, making each vertebra lighter than it would otherwise be, while maintaining the structural integrity the neck requires to suspend its own weight, and the weight of the head at the end of it. The neck is an engineering solution to a specific problem. The problem is, how do you feed a body that requires this much food without spending all your energy moving the body from one food source to the next? The sauropod's solution is to move the food-gathering apparatus, the head, to the food, while leaving the energy-expensive body in place. The neck is the arm of a reach that exceeds any other reach available to any land animal. It is efficient in the same way that a long arm is efficient when the resources are high and spread out and the body is heavy and the energy cost of moving the body is high. The light in the valley is strengthening now, not quickly. The strengthening is as gradual as the darkening was, as gradual as everything that the Jurassic does, which is to say patient and without drama and completely committed to arriving at the right state by taking the time required rather than by rushing. The sauropods are increasingly visible in this light, their details becoming specific where they were earlier merely shapes. The texture of the skin, slightly loose over the ribcage, more tightly fitted over the haunches. The slow movement of the tail, always the slow movement of the tail, a counterbalance that does its work continuously, even in stillness, because the body at this scale requires continuous small adjustments to remain upright and balanced. One of the sauropods lifts its head from the water and looks in your direction, not at you specifically. The eyes of a sauropod, set high on the skull on either side, do not see in your direction the way forward-facing eyes see in a direction. They take in the general scene, processing it for the specific signals that require response. You are not, in this light, at this distance, producing any such signals. You are still, and you are small, and the breeze is blowing your scent away from the animal, and you are simply part of the riverbank landscape, another shape in the growing light that requires no particular attention. There is something that happens in the witness of large animals that is difficult to describe without resorting to the language of the spiritual, which is not entirely inappropriate. Not in any supernatural sense, but in the sense that the word spiritual is sometimes used to indicate experiences that exceed the ordinary scale of daily life, that place the individual self in relation to something so much larger than the individual self, that the usual boundaries of the self temporarily soften or dissolve. Standing in the presence of something genuinely enormous, something alive and breathing and looking out at the same world from a completely different vantage point, does something to the mind's relationship with its own perspective that ordinary experience does not do. Perhaps what it does is make the perspective temporary, which it has always been, but which is not always felt as temporary in the ordinary run of experience. In the presence of a sauropod, the temporariness of your perspective is simply visible. Here is an animal that has been alive for longer than you have been alive, that will live longer still, that has witnessed this river and this valley from its sauropod vantage point through more seasons than you have experienced in your lifetime, that carries in its body the accumulated history of a lineage that stretches back through time further than your imagination can comfortably reach. You are brief and it is not, and the river is briefer than neither, and the valley it runs through is more ancient still. Let this settle into you as the morning light settles into the valley. The way light settles, without demand, without requiring that you do anything with it, simply arriving and changing the quality of what it touches. The sauropods at the river are simply part of what the morning has to offer, like the river sound, and the bird calls beginning in the canopy, and the dew on the fern fronds, and the first direct warmth of the sun when it clears the ridge. They are features of this world, the way mountains are features of later worlds, large and patient and entirely themselves, indifferent to being witnessed and somehow more beautiful for the indifference. Rest in this light. The morning is gentle at this hour, and the sauropods are peaceful, and the river is running, and the valley is alive in the particular way that valleys alive with ancient things are alive, steadily, continuously, without interruption. You are part of this steadiness for now. You are held within it, as everything in this valley is held within it, by the simple fact of being here and breathing and alive in a world that provides, in this morning light, in this warm and growing hour, everything that being alive requires. The sun climbs. In the Jurassic, the sun climbs over a world that receives it differently than the world you know. There is more moisture in the atmosphere here. The air carries water in amounts that would, to a visitor from the future, feel almost coastal even in the interior of a continent. This moisture scatters the light, it softens the edges of shadows. It makes the sunlight arriving at the forest floor feel diffuse and generous. the way light through a thin curtain feels, present and warm but without the hard particularity of direct exposure. By midday, the forest has settled into what you might think of as its rest. This is not literal sleep, though some of the creatures here do reduce their activity in the heat of the middle hours. It is more an intensification of the quality that has been present since you arrived, a heaviness, a fullness. The sense of a world that has, in the hours since dawn, done enough. The sauropods have returned to the forest, moving into the deeper shade. The small theropod you watched at the river's edge has long since disappeared into its own purposes, somewhere beyond the reach of your observation. The river continues, but even the river sounds different in the midday heat, slightly slower in rhythm, slightly lower in urgency, as though even the water is conserving itself against the warmth. You have moved from the fern bank to a place beneath one of the great conifers, where the roots create a natural shelter, a partial enclosure of root and shadow that is cooler than the open ground by several degrees. The earth here is dark and slightly damp, and it smells of something you can only describe as the smell of age. The accumulated age of this tree, which has been growing in this spot for centuries. The accumulated age of the forest it is part of, which has been building itself in this valley for much longer. The accumulated age of the soil itself, which is the product of biological processes so ancient that the organisms responsible for them are far older than the trees they feed. Insects move through the midday air with the specific randomness of things that are not going anywhere in particular but are always somewhere particular. A large dragonfly, its wings spanning a width that would surprise you if you had not already been surprised several times today by the scale that everything here achieves, hovers briefly at the edge of the root shelter, its wings a blur of motion at a frequency your eyes can barely process. Its eyes are immense. They wrap around most of its head, providing a nearly spherical field of vision, seeing in multiple spectra simultaneously, processing information at a speed that makes your own visual system feel almost leisurely by comparison. And then it is gone, continuing its aerobatic circuit of the forest floor, catching things too small for you to see. The cycad beside you is in the process of doing what cycads do in the warm hours, which is to say, very little that is visible. The real work of a cycad happens at the cellular level, in the slow chemistry of photosynthesis and growth, in the gradual thickening of the cone at its center, in the microscopic negotiations between its roots and the soil it inhabits. From the outside, it simply sits there, the same palm-like patience it has always presented, unchanged by the warmth or the light or your observation of it. Cycads are very good at being themselves regardless of what surrounds them. You feel the warmth on your face and arms where the sun reaches through the breaks in the canopy. The patches of sunlight on the forest floor are not fixed. They move with the motion of the leaves above, expanding and contracting, shifting their boundaries in slow patterns that have no relationship to any grid or plan, but create, over the course of an hour, a kind of visual music, a slow and irregular composition of light and shadow that is different from any moment that preceded it, and will not be repeated in precisely this form in any moment that follows. A millipede, very long, its many legs moving in the fluid wave sequence that gives millipedes their particular and hypnotic quality of motion, crosses the space between two roots near your left hand. It is dark brown, the colour of the forest floor itself, and its body segments catch the light with a faint iridescence, a suggestion of other colours within the brown, colours that appear and disappear as the sunlight patches shift. The millipede moves with complete purpose and complete calm. It is not rushing toward anything or away from anything. It is simply in motion, which is, for a millipede, the same as being at rest, the same as being exactly where it should be, and doing exactly what it should be doing. The quality of the shade beneath the conifer is almost architectural. The canopy above has organized itself, over years of reaching toward light and competing with the canopies of its neighbors, into a structure that admits light according to its own logic, a logic built from the angles of branches and the orientation of needles, and the particular position of this tree in relation to the sun's path across the sky. The result is a filtered light that has warmth but no heat, illumination but no glare, a light that is easy to be within for a long time without feeling anything other than comfortable. You think about the concept of patience without quite meaning to. The word arrives on its own, as a description of everything around you. The tree is patient. The cycad is patient. The millipede crossing the root is patient in its motion, which is unhurried without being slow, purposeful without being urgent. Even the insects in the air, which move quickly, move with a patience underneath the speed. A patience that is simply the quality of living beings that are doing the thing they are made to do rather than working against their nature in the direction of something else. There is a Jurassic version of silence in the warm hours. It is not the absence of sound. The forest is full of sound. The insects, the wind in the canopy, the distant river, the occasional percussion of something large moving through the understory on the far side of the valley. But the sounds are arranged in a way that produces, in the aggregate, a quiet, a quality of the auditory landscape that feels, from within, like calm, like the world talking to itself in a low voice about things that do not require response. Perhaps this is what you notice most about the Jurassic in these warm, heavy hours. Not the grandeur of the large things, which you have already witnessed and which your mind has already begun to incorporate into its sense of what is normal here, but the quality of the ordinary moment in a Jurassic midday, which is to say a moment in which nothing dramatic is occurring, nothing is threatening or being threatened, nothing is beginning or ending, nothing is demanding attention, is a moment of extraordinary peace. It is a moment that is entirely about the fact of existing in a world that has provided, for now, everything that existing requires. Your eyes grow heavy in the warm shade. The millipede has long since crossed the root and disappeared into the leaf litter on the other side. The dragonfly returned once, briefly, and departed again. The cycad beside you continues its invisible work with the same palm-like patience it always presents. The patches of sunlight on the forest floor continue their slow rearrangement, their visual music at a tempo that is perfectly calibrated to the border between wakefulness and what lies beyond. Wakefulness. You are not required to stay awake for this. The Jurassic midday does not need your witness. It has been unfolding without witness for longer than witness has existed, and it will continue to unfold without witness for longer still. Your presence here is incidental to the forest, incidental to the river, incidental to the great project of biological time that the Jurassic represents. And that incidentalness is, in this moment, the most restful thing you have ever felt. To be incidental, to be present but not required, to be here but not needed, to simply exist warmly and without purpose in the shade of a tree that is larger than anything you have built, in a world that is older than anything you have imagined. Sleep, if you want to. The conifer will still be here. The cycad will still be here. The forest floor with its millipedes and its insects and its slow chemistry of organic decomposition will still be here. The river will still be here. The warm hours will continue for a while yet, and when they end, the afternoon will begin, and when the afternoon ends, the evening will gather, and when the evening ends, the night will return, and the night is full of things worth resting through. Let the warm hours hold you, let the shade hold you, let the sound of the Jurassic midday, which is not silence but is the shape that sound makes when it is at rest, hold you. Let it all hold you for as long as you need to be held. There is no hurry. There has never been a hurry here. The forest knows only the pace of its own growth, and its growth is measured in centuries. And there is time, and there is time, and there is always more time, and the warmth is complete, and the shade is cool, and the world is very old. The warmth of the Jurassic midday is not the sharp warmth of desert heat, or the humid heaviness of a tropical storm. It is a warmth of quality rather than of intensity, a warmth that enters the body slowly and stays, that does not demand the body's cooling system spring into action, but simply settles into the tissues the way warmth settles into anything porous and receptive. The air here carries the warmth of the sun after that warmth has been processed by the atmosphere, softened and distributed, arriving at the forest floor as something general rather than specific. You feel it in your limbs before you feel it anywhere else. The limbs that have been in contact with the slightly cooler soil warming now as the midday air circulates below the canopy. The cycad beside you is a study in a particular kind of patience. Not the patience of waiting, because the cycad is not waiting for anything. It has arrived at a state of being that requires no future condition to be complete. The cycad is, at this moment, entirely itself. The fronds are what fronds are. The cone at its centre is accumulating what it will accumulate, without hurry, without anticipation, as a natural consequence of the processes that are occurring within it. To be as unambivalent about one's existence as a cycad is perhaps one of the conditions that the Jurassic offers most freely to those willing to settle into its pace. The ferns at the edges of the root shelter sway slightly as the midday convection currents begin to develop, the warm air rising from the sun-heated ground and drawing in cooler air from the shadowed spaces beneath the canopy. This exchange of air, which happens every midday in every Jurassic Valley that has sun and shade and ground and sky, is one of the fundamental mechanics of a world that is always in the process of distributing its resources, always in the process of moving what is here to where it is needed, through the patient and impersonal agency of the physical laws that govern how fluids behave in temperature gradients. You notice the quality of the midday silence with the same specificity that you might notice the quality of water after you have been thirsty, not the absence of sound. The Jurassic is never entirely without sound, but a quality of the sound that is different from morning and different from night, a quality that belongs specifically to this hour, when the high energy of the morning is done and the preparation for the afternoon has not yet begun, a midday quality. Still, warm, present, not particularly oriented toward anything. The fungi at the base of the nearest dead tree are doing something in the midday heat that they do not do in the cooler hours. Their mycelium is more active, the chemical processes of decomposition running faster in the warmth, releasing gases into the air around the tree base that contribute their specific notes to the already complex smell of the forest floor. You can smell it more clearly now than you could in the morning. A faint, sweet, slightly mushroom-like quality that is not unpleasant, but is specific. It is the smell of the world's most ancient recycling system, running at midday efficiency. Close your eyes. Let the warmth from above and the cool from below meet at the surface of your skin and stay there, not pulling you in either direction, simply surrounding you in the narrow band of exactly right temperature that you have found in this space between root and canopy. This is the body's preferred state. Not too hot, not too cold, not requiring any active management of its own temperature, simply existing in the temperature it was designed for. The body in its preferred temperature is a body that is releasing something it normally holds. A vigilance, perhaps. A readiness. The readiness to act, which is always slightly present in the waking state even when nothing requires action, is very slightly less present right now. The dragonfly has returned. Or, one, very much like it hovers at the edge of the root shelter, its compound eyes taking in everything simultaneously, its wings beating at a frequency that is resolved by the visual system into the impression of wings barely moving, as though the dragonfly is simply suspended in the air by an arrangement it made with gravity a long time ago, and gravity has honoured ever since. The dragonfly does not remain for long. It moves along its aerobatic circuit and is gone, continuing whatever calculation of territory and food and potential mates its nervous system is running, a calculation that appears effortless because the nervous system that is running it was built for exactly this. The afternoon, when it comes, will bring its own character to the valley. The thermals that the pterosaurs ride will develop as the ground temperature rises above the air temperature, and the convective currents strengthen. The larger animals will shift their positions relative to the shade. The insects will become slightly more active rather than less. But for now, in the midday still point, none of that has arrived yet. The valley rests in the same suspension that you rest in, the suspension of the hour that is complete in itself, not preparation for anything, not conclusion of anything, simply the hour it is. The afternoon shadows of the conifer trunks stretch toward the west, long and precise, every needle of every high branch contributing its small shadow to the larger shadow of the whole tree. The shadow is cool in the way that shade is always cool in the Jurassic, not dramatically cool but perceptibly so, a few degrees at most, but those few degrees are enough to feel, enough to make the shaded ground a more hospitable surface than the sunlit ground, enough to draw the creatures that need to manage their temperature toward the shadow's edge, rather than the sun's direct influence. Sleep if the midday warmth is bringing you there. The Jurassic will continue. The warmth will continue. The shadow will continue to move as the sun moves, slowly, in its great reliable arc. And you will be here, in the root shelter, in the shade of the ancient conifer, in the warm and still air of the Jurassic midday, resting as completely and as simply as the forest floor rests, which is to say without effort, without awareness of the resting, simply in the state that the world has made available to things in need of rest, in the generous, uncomplicating way that the Jurassic has always made its gifts available, simply by being exactly what it is. The sky above the Jurassic forest belongs, in the afternoon hours, to the pterosaurs. You see them first from the clearing at the river's edge, where the sky is fully visible between the canopy edges on either side of the valley. They are crossing the thermals that rise from the sun-warmed ground, riding circles of ascending air that you cannot see but can infer from the shape of their flight, the way they hold their wings without flapping, the way they are moved upward by something that is not wind so much as the world breathing out. The nearest one is close enough that you can see the membrane of its wing against the blue-white sky. The wing is not solid. It is alive with the small translucent quality that living membranes have, the quality of something through which light passes differently than it passes through stone or wood. The veins running through the membrane catch the afternoon sun at certain angles, and for a moment the whole wing seems to glow, briefly and faintly, with the light it has borrowed from above. What the pterosaur sees from its height, you can only imagine. The valley spread below it, the river as a thin silver thread, the sauropods in the forest edge as slow-moving patches of texture in the green. The clearing where you are standing as a small opening in the canopy through which the detail of the ground might or might not be visible at this distance. The pterosaur does not think in the ways you think. Its brain is organized differently, built for the continuous processing of visual and vestibular information that flight requires. But it sees, and what it sees is the Jurassic from above, which is a different world from the Jurassic seen from below, a world of large patterns and slow movements, and the long geography of forest and water and open ground. There are several of them in the sky above the valley. They do not flock in the way birds will eventually flock, close grouped and coordinated, following each other's movements in the near instantaneous social calculation of a murmuration. They are more loosely assembled than that, each following its own thermal, its own assessment of where the rising air is most generous. But they occupy the same sky, and occasionally one will shift toward another, and the two will adjust their positions relative to each other in a way that suggests, without quite being, coordination. One descends. It does not fall. The distinction is important. It shifts its wing geometry in a series of small adjustments, tilting the membrane slightly, angling the elongated flight finger that supports the outer portion of the wing, and the effect is a controlled descent that curves in a long, gradual arc toward the river's surface. As it approaches the water, it extends its jaw, and there is a brief disturbance in the surface, a touch and a lift, and then the animal is climbing again, the fish or the water creature it has caught already being moved toward the back of the throat by the tongue's deft backward press. The whole action has taken perhaps 2 seconds. The river accepts the disturbance and resumes its character. The pterosaur climbs back toward its thermal, adjusting its wing again, catching the ascending air and rising with it in that effortless, hypnotic circle that seems to ask nothing of the animal, to require no more effort than floating requires of a bubble. It rises until it is at its former height, and then it continues rising, taking everything the thermal offers, which is to say everything the warm ground and the warm air above the ground are offering to the sky in this particular moment, freely and without any sense of what it is given away. You have been watching the sky for a while now, and the watching has done something to the quality of your awareness. Looking up for a sustained period has a specific effect on the mind that looking horizontally or downward does not have. It opens something. It removes something. The sense of enclosure that comes from being within a landscape, even a generous one like this valley, lifts slightly when the sky fills the visual field, and what remains is a quality of spaciousness that is also, paradoxically, a quality of peace. The sky is very large. Your concerns are not. Another pterosaur, slightly smaller than the first, passes directly overhead. You are lying in the clearing now, looking straight up, and it crosses your field of vision slowly enough that you can track it without moving your eyes. The membrane slightly translucent against the sky, the long jaw extended in front of the skull, the vestigial tail behind. The whole animal the colour of warm sand with darker patches along the neck. It does not notice you. You are too still and too small to trigger whatever response its nervous system would generate in the presence of something it needed to attend to. You are, from its height, simply part of the ground, which is simply the bottom of the sky. Consider what it is to live in the air. Not as a thought experiment exactly, but as a sensation. Let your body imagine the thermal rising beneath it. Let it imagine the slight adjustment of the wing membrane, the response of the air to that adjustment, the tipping of the body, and the change in the downward pull of gravity that a different angle of flight produces. Let it imagine the complete absence of ground beneath the feet, the complete presence of sky in all directions, the particular freedom, which is also a particular responsibility, of being the only thing that is determining, from moment to moment, whether you stay up or come down. The pterosaurs are not free in the way the word is usually meant. They are completely subject to the physics of lift and gravity and air density and the thermal patterns that the ground below generates. But within those constraints they are fully realized. They are doing, in the afternoon sky above the Jurassic Valley, exactly what everything about them was built to do, and the quality of that complete alignment between design and action is something you can observe from the ground without being able to fully describe, which is perhaps its most useful quality for the purposes of rest. It suggests without explaining. It invites without demanding. It simply is, in the air above you, turning and gliding and descending and rising, doing the thing it does, in the warmth and the light, without any awareness of your witness and without any need for it. The afternoon light is changing. It is not dimming, not yet. The afternoon has some time still before it begins to yield to evening, but it is shifting in colour in the way afternoon light shifts, becoming slightly warmer, slightly more amber, as the sun moves through the lower portion of its arc and the light has more atmosphere to travel through before it arrives at the ground. The pterosaurs in this light become warmer in colour too, the sand tones of their membranes picking up the amber of the sky, so that they seem to glow slightly, as though they themselves were producing light rather than reflecting it. You watch them until watching is no longer necessary, until the watching has completed itself and become something more like simply being in a place where pterosaurs are also being, at a different height, without any particular relationship between you and them beyond the shared use of this valley at this hour. And then you let your eyes move from the sky back to the level of the ground, and the contrast is startling in a quiet way. The sky is enormous and empty except for the pterosaurs. The ground is small and dense and full. The insects in the clearing are doing what insects do in the afternoon, which is largely to do with the flowers of the early angiosperms that are beginning, at the edges of the Jurassic world, to experiment with colour and scent as tools of reproduction. There are not many flowers here yet. The angiosperms have not yet achieved the dominance they will eventually achieve, and the landscape is still primarily the greens and browns of conifers and cycads and ferns. But here and there, in the clearings and at the river's edge, small splashes of colour have appeared, tentative and exploratory, as though the world is trying out the concept of beauty and is not yet sure whether it will stick. A butterfly, or something moving in the direction of what butterflies will become, lands briefly on one of these early experiments in colour. It touches the structure of what might be a flower with its front legs, tasting it in the way insects taste, then moves on. The movement is delicate beyond the delicacy of anything human-built, a delicacy that comes from the intersection of extremely small scale and extremely precise function, the same kind of delicacy that a single musical note has when it is the right note in the right place. The pterosaurs continue in the sky, the insects continue in the clearing, the afternoon continues its slow amber progression toward evening. You are here, at the centre of all of it, lying in the grass of the clearing with the warm sky above you and the warm ground beneath you and the ancient forest on all sides, and the world does not require anything from you, and the sky does not require anything from you, and the pterosaurs in their slow circles do not require anything from you, and this is, in its entirety, enough. More than enough. Everything. The pterosaur that passed directly overhead has continued south along the valley, riding the thermal column that develops above the cleared ground of the river bend. From below, you watch its recession, the shape of it shrinking without diminishing, maintaining its absolute quality even as its apparent size decreases. This is one of the specific effects of watching something fly away over a long distance. The thing does not become less itself as it becomes smaller. It becomes more essentially itself, reduced to its most fundamental visual information, the silhouette that contains its identity even without the details. There is a question that the sight of pterosaurs tends to produce in minds that have not been exposed to them before. The question is roughly, what is it like to fly? This question is not answerable in the ordinary sense, because what flying is like from the inside of a flying creature's experience is not accessible to any creature that does not fly, but you can work toward it obliquely. You can notice the quality of the air above the valley, which is different from the air at the valley floor. Warmer, for one thing, in the thermal columns, more dynamic, the air in these columns moving upward at speeds you would feel as a wind if you were moving through it. The pterosaur's wing is not a simple structure. It is among the most complex structural adaptations in the biological world, a surface that combines extreme lightness with extreme strength, a surface that can change its shape in real time in response to changing air conditions, that can present different profiles to the wind at different moments in a single second, that is simultaneously rigid enough to generate lift and flexible enough to make the fine adjustments that controlled flight requires. The membrane is not passive, it has musculature. It is an active participant in the flight rather than a passive sail. Rest in the fact of the sky, not the details of the sky, which require attention and therefore interfere with rest. Just the fact of it. The sky above the Jurassic Valley is as large as any sky has ever been. It reaches from this place to the horizon in all directions, and the horizon here, in a world without buildings or towers or any vertical structure made by human hands, is as far as the physics of the atmosphere permits the eye to reach. The world is very open from this fern bank. The sky is very large. You are very small and very warm and very near to sleep. A cloud is crossing the sun, slowly, in the way that clouds cross suns in a world where the atmosphere is moving at its own pace for its own reasons, without reference to anything's schedule. The shadow of the cloud reaches the valley floor gradually, a slow darkening of the light that moves across the ground toward you and then over you, the quality of the light shifting from the direct warmth of full sun to the softer, more diffuse warmth of filtered sun, and you feel it on your face as a slight cooling that is not unpleasant, a brief respite from the directness of the midday light. The pterosaurs in the sky continue in the shadow of the cloud with the same efficiency they demonstrated in the sun. The thermal that the cloud is crossing will weaken slightly in the shadow, the ground not heating the air above it as strongly without direct sunlight. The pterosaurs adjust to this as they adjust to all changes in the air, automatically, without deliberation, through the continuous feedback loop of their sensory systems and their wing adjustments, responding to the world as it is in each instant, rather than as it was a moment ago or as it will be in a moment hence. There is a lesson in this, though the pterosaurs are not offering it intentionally. The lesson is simply the observation. The most effective engagement with a changing environment involves continuous responsiveness rather than fixed strategy. The pterosaur that is rigidly committed to a particular wing angle in a changing air column will be less efficient than the one that adjusts continuously. Not more anxious, not more uncertain, simply more responsive. Responsiveness and rest are not opposites. You can be deeply at rest and still responsive. The body, when truly at rest, becomes more responsive, not less. The cloud passes. The sun returns to the valley floor with the same warmth it had before the cloud interrupted it, as though the cloud was simply a pause in the sun's long provision, a breath taken in the middle of a sentence. The pterosaurs in their thermals rise more efficiently in the returning direct sun. The insects in the clearing become slightly more active. The ferns around you reflect the direct light in the particular way that ferns reflect it, with a slight sheen on the upper surfaces of the fronds, a quality of green that is more luminous than the green under diffuse light. Let the afternoon continue. It is going to continue in any case, with or without your particular attention to it. The sun will follow its arc, the pterosaurs will follow their thermals, the river will follow its course. The forest will do what forests do in the afternoon, which is to process the light and the warmth through all the layers of its biology, from the canopy to the roots to the soil, in the continuous and patient chemistry of photosynthesis and respiration that keeps the world supplied with what the world needs to stay alive. All of it will continue. Your rest is simply the state of being within what continues, without being responsible for it. The sky above the valley is, in this afternoon hour, the most reassuring thing you have ever looked at. It is large without being threatening. It is empty without being lonely. It is full of pterosaurs and clouds, and the particular quality of Jurassic light that has been warming this valley for millions of years and will warm it for millions more. You are in it, briefly and warmly, lying in the fern bank with the river below and the forest around and the enormous, patient sky above. There is nowhere else to be. There is no other moment to be in. There is only this. And this is, in its entirely uncomplicated way, enough. Evening arrives in the Jurassic the way all large things arrive, gradually and then completely. The sun does not set so much as it relinquishes the sky in stages, the direct light going first, the colour lasting longer, the warmth persisting in the stone, and the dark earth for hours after the light itself has gone. The transition from afternoon to evening is the longest and most generous part of the Jurassic day, a slow dissolving of one kind of world into another, a transition that the landscape accepts without comment. In the evening light, you find the stegosaur, or rather, you become aware of the stegosaur. It has been at the edge of the clearing for some time, moving among the tree ferns with the particular slow patience of large herbivores, eating with a thoroughness that suggests an animal that has no reason to rush because the food is not going anywhere, and it has all the time the Jurassic permits, which is to say all the time there is. The stegosaur is shorter than the sauropods, substantially so, but the impression it gives is not of smallness but of solidness. Its body is compact and massive, built close to the ground, with 4 legs that are clearly differentiated in length, the back legs longer than the front in a way that tips the body slightly upward toward the tail. The tail itself is held up and slightly cocked in the way stegosaur tails are always held, with the 4 spikes at its end, presented at an angle that is not threatening at the moment, but suggests that the angle could change quickly if circumstances required it. The plates along its back catch the evening light in a way that rewards attention. They are arranged in 2 staggered rows running from the shoulders to the base of the tail, and they are not the same along their length. The plates near the shoulders are smaller, more densely spaced. They grow larger as they progress along the back, reaching their maximum size at the midpoint of the animal's spine, and then diminishing again toward the tail. The overall effect, in the evening light, is of something ornate, something that has been considered, something that carries on its back a design that is so specifically itself that to imagine it belonging to any other creature is impossible. What the plates are for has been a question worth carrying gently, not urgently. The most likely answer involves thermoregulation, the management of the animal's body temperature through the circulation of blood through the plates, which can be warmed by the sun or cooled by the breeze depending on which the animal needs. But the plates may also be involved in display, in the social communication of size or health or identity. They may be both of these things and others that are not yet fully understood. The stegosaur itself has no opinion about the question. It is simply wearing the plates it was born with, carrying them as it has always carried them, letting them do whatever it is they do while it attends to the more immediately legible business of eating. It eats with a selectivity that is more specific than it first appears. The stegosaur does not browse indiscriminately. It moves its small, narrow head with deliberate attention, nipping certain fronds and bypassing others, choosing the cycad leaves at a particular stage of development over those at another stage, making distinctions between plants that seem, to the untrained eye, identical. This selectivity is the accumulated result of evolutionary preference, millions of years of ancestors making the same kinds of choices, the descendants of the successful choosers being the ones still here to choose. The stegosaur does not know this history. It simply knows, in the inarticulate way that bodies know things, what it wants and what it does not, and it moves through the evening forest pursuing that knowledge with patient, slow efficiency. The evening light has found the plates. In the particular angle of the sun's last direct rays, the plates are flushed slightly, the blood that circulates through them carrying, in this light, a warmth that is almost visible. The texture of the plate surface catches the low light and throws it back with a slight roughness. Not smooth, not glinting, but warm and present, the kind of surface that seems to absorb colour from the air around it rather than simply reflecting what is offered. In this light, the stegosaur's back is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. Not beautiful in the sense of delicacy or ornamentation, beautiful in the sense of rightness, of a thing that is exactly what it should be. Here is the quiet mystery the stegosaur carries as the evening gathers. The plates that absorb the last warmth of the day are also the plates that will release it slowly into the cool of the night. What appears to be ornament is actually function. What looks like decoration is also regulation. You cannot always tell, looking at a living thing, which of its features serve the obvious purpose and which serve the invisible one. Sometimes the most conspicuous features are doing the quietest work. The stegosaur finishes with the cycad fronds and moves to the edge of the river, its footsteps slow and compressed and regular. It drinks without urgency, lowering its small head to the water and drawing in long, slow mouthfuls that you can almost hear as a change in the sound of the water near its muzzle. While it drinks, its tail sways very slightly, the 4 spikes moving through a narrow arc that describes an invisible circle in the evening air. The motion is not threatening. It is simply how the tail rests when the animal is still and comfortable and occupied with drinking. In the increasing dusk, the stegosaur's plates are less visible as individual structures and more present as a shape. A profile against the sky above the river that is specific and unmistakable. Even in silhouette, even reduced to the essential geometry of its outline, this animal is recognizable as itself. Its silhouette is its signature. The universe has written it in a specific hand, and the hand is the same from every angle, from every distance, in every kind of light. Other animals are settling with the evening. You can hear them without seeing them, in the forest on both sides of the valley. The sounds that accompanied the day are withdrawing, replaced by the different sounds of evening, which are the sounds of things transitioning. The birds or bird-like things in the canopy are making the sounds they make at dusk, which are different from the sounds they make at midday or at dawn, shorter and more individual, as though each animal is making a private accounting of the day before settling into the night's different relationship with the world. The stegosaur raises its head from the water and stands for a moment looking at the other bank. What does it see? What does its brain make of the darkening forest across the river, the subtle shift of light on the water, the evening insects beginning their first tentative songs above the surface? These are questions without answers, which is perhaps the most honest thing about them. We do not know what it is to be a stegosaur looking at an evening river. In the Jurassic, we cannot know. The subjectivity of that experience is lost to the same time that preserved the bones and the impressions of the plates in the stone, preserving the evidence of the body while the experience of the body went somewhere that the stone cannot hold. But you can be here, now, watching it from the fern bank while the evening settles. You can watch the plates on its back grow darker as the light falls. You can watch its tail resume its slow sway as it turns from the river and begins moving back toward the tree ferns at the forest edge. You can watch it disappear, gradually, one step at a time, into the growing dark of the forest, the silhouette of its plates, the last thing visible against the pale sky, and then, not visible at all, and then the forest is simply the forest again, the way it was before the stegosaur arrived, except that it is not quite the same, because you have seen what it contains. The evening star, though you would not call it that because the concept of evening star belongs to a later time, appears above the ridgeline to the west. One point of light in a sky that is not yet full of stars, but is beginning to prepare itself for them. The river reflects it. A single bright point in the moving dark of the water, there and then displaced, and then there again as the current ripples and smooths. Let the stegosaur go into the forest. Let the evening come in with its stars and its cooling air and its insect voices. Let the river take the last of the light and hold it briefly, and then let it go. You are warm here, in the fern bank, with the cooling air beginning to arrive from the forest and the warmth of the ground still beneath you and the first stars appearing in the deep blue above the valley. The night is arriving. The night is always arriving, here, the way it arrives in every world that has a sky, and the night is kind. The stegosaur's relationship with the forest edge is as old as the relationship between any large herbivore and the transition zone between open ground and closed canopy. These transition zones are the most productive parts of any forested landscape, where the plants at the forest boundary receive more sunlight than the plants in the interior, where the soil has accumulated moisture from the forest while receiving the direct input of sun and rain that the interior misses, where the diversity of plant species is highest and the density of available food is greatest. The stegosaur knows this without knowing it, in the same way that it knows everything it knows, through the accumulated experience of a lineage that has been learning where the food is for longer than learning has been a concept. The evening light on the stegosaur's plates does something specific at the angle it currently occupies in the sky. It creates a gradient on each plate, lighting the forward-facing surfaces warmly while leaving the rearward surfaces in relative shadow, so that each plate presents a dual quality, warm and cool simultaneously, lit and shadowed in a way that gives them three-dimensional presence that the flatter light of midday does not provide. The plates have depth in this light, they have thickness. They are obviously biological structures rather than geological features, obviously grown rather than deposited, each one with its own specific shape that is similar to, but not identical with the shapes of its neighbours. The relationship between the stegosaur and the predators that share this valley is a relationship defined by the mathematics of risk and protection. The plates and the tail spikes are not weapons in the offensive sense. They are not tools for attacking other animals. They are, in the strict sense, defensive adaptations, structures that make the stegosaur more costly to attack than the equivalent caloric value of a stegosaur would be worth paying. The Allosaurus that might otherwise target a stegosaur calculates, in whatever way that calculation occurs in an Allosaurus, whether the cost of those tail spikes is worth the benefit of the meal. Often, the calculation goes against the attack. The stegosaur grazes on. This is the evening logic of the Jurassic herbivores, not the dramatic logic of combat or flight, which are the events that stick in the imagination, but the quiet logic of being expensive enough to attack that attack is usually not worth it, of being, in the ecological sense, a bad investment for the predator. The stegosaur has made itself a bad investment through the specific engineering of its body, and this engineering works not because it prevents every attack, but because it makes attacks expensive enough that the predator's energy is better spent on easier prey. The stegosaur's survival is not the product of winning fights. It is the product of deterring fights before they start. What does the stegosaur experience? The question has no satisfying answer, but it is worth holding lightly. It experiences the ferns under its feet, the specific texture of the soil, the temperature differential between standing in the last sun and moving into the shade. It experiences the smell of the river, which carries information about what has recently been in the river, what has passed through the water upstream, what the water has collected in its passage from the higher ground to this bend. It experiences the evening cooling, which the plates will register before the animal's interior temperature registers it, the plates acting as sensitive surface area heat exchangers, in continuous dialogue with the surrounding air. The stegosaur experiences the evening without interpreting it. This is the most fundamental difference between its experience and your experience of the same evening. The reddening sky, the cooling air, the sound of the river, the insects beginning their evening chorus, none of these things are, to the stegosaur, invested with meaning beyond their immediate practical content. The cooling air means moving into a behavior that maintains body temperature. The dimming light means transitioning toward the behaviors that work in lower light. The sound of the river means water is near, which means a known resource is accessible. The stegosaur's evening is purely present, purely immediate, without the layer of interpretation and meaning-making that transforms your experience of the same evening into something richer and more complicated. Which experience is better? This is perhaps not a useful question, or perhaps it is the most useful question, depending on what you are trying to understand about the relationship between consciousness and rest. What is clear is that the stegosaur's evening is less burdened. The animal is not carrying the evening's events into an assessment of the day's progress. It is not comparing this evening to other evenings. It is not planning for tomorrow. It is simply in the evening, as thoroughly and completely as it is possible to be in any moment, without any portion of itself located elsewhere in time. The river at this hour has acquired a quality of gold that it did not have at midday. The low sun is arriving at it from an angle that the high sun cannot achieve, hitting the moving surface at a shallow angle that catches each small ripple and wavelet and tiny disturbance and lights it from the side, so that the river seems to be lit from within rather than from above. The stegosaur drinking at its edge is lit by the same light, the warm gold of it on the rough texture of the plates, on the side-lit surface of the flanks, on the small blunt head lowered to the water. Let the evening continue. The stegosaur will drink its fill and return to the fern forest at the valley's edge, and the evening will deepen into dusk, and the dusk will deepen into dark, and the night will come, as it has always come here, gradually and without announcement, covering the valley with the particular quality of dark that belongs to a world with no artificial light, a dark that is complete and comprehensive, and, in its completeness, deeply peaceful. You have been in this valley for a day now. You have seen what it offers in all its hours. And what it offers in all its hours is the same thing, the world being exactly itself, in the Jurassic, in the warm and patient and ancient and unconcerned way that the Jurassic has always been itself. The evening star is there. One point of light above the western ridge, the first fixed point in the sky that is not the sun or the moon. The stegosaur does not see it, or does not register it, or does not incorporate it into any system of meaning that it carries. But you can see it, that single bright point in the blue that is becoming dark, and the river reflects it, and the evening is complete, and the night is beginning, and the world goes on. If you are drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. The second night arrives with a different quality from the first. Not because the world has changed. The world here changes on timescales that make any individual night indistinguishable from the ones before and after it. But something in you has changed. You have spent a day in the Jurassic now. You have heard the river and watched the sauropods and lain in the shade of the conifer in the warm hours, and seen the pterosaurs in the afternoon sky, and watched the stegosaur drink at the edge of the evening. Your body has learned the rhythms of this place. And now, as the second night settles in, there is a recognition in the settling, a sense of return. The fireflies are back. They never left, exactly, but in the daylight they were invisible, present in the ferns and the damp understory but dormant, their light production at rest in the warmth of the sun. Now, as the dark comes back, they return to their visible selves, those slow arcs of yellow-green light above the river ferns, those patient signals to each other in a language made of light. You watch them with a familiarity that was not available to you last night. You know these fireflies now, not individually, not in any way that would survive examination, but as a phenomenon, as a feature of this river valley at night, something that belongs to this place the way the river belongs to it, and the ferns belong to it. Something wonderful is happening in the dead wood at the base of the nearest great conifer. The bioluminescence there is different from the fireflies above the ferns. It is not a flashing, not an intermittent signal, but a steady, very faint glow that emanates from the fungi working through the rotting wood. A green-white light so dim that you would miss it if you were not lying very still, and your eyes had not fully adjusted to the dark. But it is there, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and the darkness of the forest floor becomes, in that spot, not quite darkness, but something that has a different relationship with light, something that makes its own small claim on the spectrum of the visible. The fungi here are doing what they have been doing since the day is long before this one, breaking down the complex polymers of the dead wood into their constituent parts, releasing carbon back to the atmosphere, and minerals back to the soil in the slow, patient chemistry of decomposition. The light is a byproduct, not a purpose. The fungi do not need to glow. They glow because the chemical reactions of their work release energy in the form of light, as well as heat, and the light happens in this spectrum, in this colour, because that is what the chemistry produces. The forest floor is luminous by accident, and the accident is beautiful. Overhead, through the gap in the canopy that the clearing provides, the stars have reached their fullness. There are so many. This is a sky without light pollution of any kind. The Milky Way is not a faint suggestion, but a broad, vivid river of light crossing the sky from horizon to horizon, so dense with individual stars that it seems at first like cloud, like something atmospheric rather than stellar, until your eyes adjust to the distance and the depth, and you begin to perceive it for what it is, the accumulated light of billions of suns, each of them so far away that the light you are receiving from them tonight left those suns before the Jurassic was even a possibility, before the Earth had decided what kind of planet it was going to be. The sound of the second night is the same as the sound of the first night, and yet somehow has more layers to it now that you know what you are hearing. The insects in their cycling voices, the river in its low, continuous percussion over stone, the occasional larger sound from somewhere in the forest, a branch displaced, a footstep compressed, a distant call that arrives too softly and too briefly to classify. You know all of these sounds now. Your nervous system has filed them and found them acceptable, and they continue without requiring your active attention. They are simply the sound of the place you are in, the sound of being here. A small nocturnal mammal, one of the tiny, shrew-like creatures that live their entire lives in the spaces between the visible world, the spaces beneath the roots and in the bark crevices, and in the tunnel systems beneath the forest floor, emerges briefly at the edge of the root shelter. It is barely larger than your fist. Its eyes are enormous for its head, adapted to the limited light of the forest floor at night, and they catch the starlight and give it back briefly as two small amber points before the animal disappears again into the space between the roots. These small creatures are the ancestral lineage of everything you are. In the deepest sense, they are you, or rather you are them, their much later and much larger and much more complicated descendants, sleeping in the same forest where they are awake and hunting and surviving. The thought of that ancestral connection does something specific to the quality of the night. It makes it more intimate. You are not a visitor to this place, exactly. You have roots here, in the most literal genetic sense. The small mammals in the roots around you are part of your family tree, very distant branches on a tree whose trunk extends forward through time to whatever you are tonight. Everything that will one day be required to produce you is already present in these tiny, efficient, nocturnal creatures with their huge eyes and their quick heartbeats, and their determination to survive in a world built to the scale of things much larger than themselves. The campfire sound is there tonight, though the fire itself is not a Jurassic reality. What you are hearing is the sound of the world making fire-adjacent sounds. The popping and settling of the dry bark on the base of the nearest dead tree, contracting in the cooling night air, thing and strew the upper canopy, which when it catches certain arrangements of branches produces a sound not unlike the low breath of something burning. The insects themselves, in certain harmonics of their combined voices, creating a frequency that sits in the warmth register of the auditory cortex, the register that fire has always occupied. Whether these sounds are truly fire sounds or simply the sounds that the mind, in its ancient associative wisdom, maps to the fire memory, the result is the same. Warmth, safety, the oldest human comfort, reproduced here by the Jurassic night without any fire at all, simply through the arrangement of sound and temperature and darkness that this valley provides. You are held by it. You are kept by it. The ancient part of you that knows what fire means knows that you are, in this moment, in the presence of something equivalent. Here is the soft question the night carries. Somewhere in the forest behind you, something is moving on four legs, and it is moving toward the river, not urgently. Not in the direction of any alarm, simply moving as things move at night in the Jurassic, because the night is when they move. You cannot hear it clearly, you cannot see it at all, but the forest is aware of it. The forest floor creatures and the insects and the fireflies all continuing what they are doing but with a slight, almost imperceptible alteration in their pattern. The way a room full of people continues its conversation but shifts slightly when someone new enters. The forest adjusts. The forest always adjusts. And whatever is moving through it moves through the adjustment as though it has earned its place here, which it has, which everything here has, which is the most fundamental quality of the Jurassic world. You close your eyes, or you let them fall. It is the same thing. The darkness behind your eyelids is not very different from the darkness of the Jurassic night, and the sounds that the valley is producing arrive equally in both darknesses, equally present, equally continuous, equally kind. The river, the insects, the fireflies doing their silent work above the ferns, the fungi glowing faintly in the dead wood, the small mammal beneath the roots, hunting in its quick and purposeful way. The four-legged thing somewhere in the forest, moving toward the river in the way things move when they are exactly where they should be. The second night of the Jurassic is the night you stop being a visitor. You do not become part of this world in any dramatic or narrative sense. You are too temporary for that, too brief a presence in a world that measures significance in millions of years. But something adjusts in you. Something that was oriented toward observation, toward witness, toward the active stance of someone experiencing something for the first time, relaxes slightly, turns toward rest, settles into the acceptance that what is here, and it is enough, and you are part of it for now, and for now is all that rest has ever required. Let the second night be the night of letting go. Let the sounds continue without your specific attention. Let the fireflies continue their patient signals. Let the river continue its unbroken conversation with its own stones. Let the forest be the forest, doing what the forest does, at its own scale and in its own time, in the warm dark of an ancient world that has no name for the peace it is providing you. Simply receive it. Simply let it come in through whatever is still open in you, through the skin and the ears and the slow breathing, and let it settle into all the places that have been waiting to receive something exactly like this. The night is long, the night is warm, the night is full of sounds that your body has always known how to receive, sounds that are older than your species, older than your genus, older than the entire order of creatures you belong to, older than almost everything except the need to rest. The quality of the dark in the second night is different from the quality of the dark in the first night. Not in its physical properties, which are the same stars, the same river, the same forest on all sides, but in your relationship to it. The first night you were arriving, the second night you are home, not home in the permanent or possessive sense. The Jurassic cannot be owned by any visiting consciousness, and you are too temporary and too biological to own anything beyond the moments you inhabit. But home in the sense of familiarity, in the sense of knowing where the sounds are coming from, in the sense of the body having adapted, over the course of a day and a night and another day, to the rhythms of this place. The adaptation of the body to a place happens quickly, faster than you might expect. The body is a sensing instrument that was built over millions of years to integrate itself into whatever environment it finds itself in, to learn the sounds and the smells and the temperature patterns and the rhythms of light and dark of a given place, and to calibrate its own states, its wakefulness, its hunger, its alertness, its readiness for sleep, to those environmental rhythms. You have been calibrating to the Jurassic for a full day now, and the calibration is largely complete. Your body knows when the insects change their voices. It knows what the sound of something large moving in the forest sounds like, and how it differs from the sound of something small doing the same thing. It knows the specific cool of the early morning, and the specific warmth of the midday, and the specific gold of the late afternoon. In the second night, the fireflies above the fern bank are simply part of the night. Not a wonder, exactly. Not in the way they were a wonder last night when you had never seen the Jurassic fireflies before. They are simply present, as the river is present and the insects are present and the stars are present, as features of a place that you know, that you have spent time in, that has provided you with what you needed and continues to provide it. The wonder has not diminished, it has simply been incorporated. And what has been incorporated often feels more deeply real than what is still at the stage of being wondered at. The bioluminescence in the dead wood is clearer to you now. You know where to look for it. You know the approximate area of the base of the nearest large dead conifer where the fungi are working. And in that area, in the specific darkness at the base of the trunk, you can see it without the searching you had to do last night. Two small patches of faint green-white light, steady and very dim, the signature of organisms doing their chemistry in the dark. The light is beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with beauty in any aesthetic sense. It is beautiful in the sense of being exactly what it is, without apology or ornament. Something is in the river. Something that has not been in the river in the earlier part of this night, or was in the river but was sufficiently still that it produced no audible disruption. Now it moves, slowly, in the area of the deepest pool, and the water responds with sounds that are different from the sounds the river makes without something in it. A slow, wet displacement, the particular sound of something large enough to move significant water, shifting its position in that water with a patience that is almost but not quite silence. The crocodilian has relocated. This is consistent with what crocodilians do in the night hours, adjusting their position in the water in response to temperature, to the availability of prey, to some internal logic of energy management and comfort that has been refined over hundreds of millions of years of crocodilian existence into a set of behaviors that look, from the outside, almost meditative. The crocodilian in its pool is doing, in its cold-blooded way, precisely what you are doing in the fern bank. It is in the position that best serves its current needs, in a state of low activity that conserves energy while maintaining enough awareness to respond to what the night might provide. There is a companionship in this parallel resting. You and the crocodilian, each at your own position along the river, each doing your version of what the night requires. The crocodilian is not aware of you. You are not quite aware of the crocodilian, not specifically, not in the way that you would be aware of it if you could see it, but you are both here, in the same night, in the same valley, in the same ancient world, each carrying out the particular form of rest that your biology and your evolutionary history has equipped you for. The firelight sounds. This is what you have been hearing, without fully articulating it through both nights. The sounds that the world makes in the dark that carry the same qualities as the sound of fire, the organic crackle of contracting bark, the low breath of the wind in certain arrangements of branches, the specific warmth register of sounds that come from the direction of the earth rather than the sky. These sounds have been associated with fire for as long as there have been creatures capable of making that association, because fire has been part of the night for almost as long as there has been a night, and the sounds and smells and temperatures that accompany fire are among the oldest and most deeply embedded safe signals in the mammalian nervous system. Rest into the firelight sounds. Let them do what they have always done for the things that rest near fire, which is to signal safety, warmth, the presence of something that holds the dark at bay, the comfort of the most ancient and fundamental form of shelter. You do not need an actual fire. The world is providing the equivalent. The warmth of the Jurassic night, the specific sounds of the forest and the river and the contracting wood, the bioluminescence in the dead wood with its faint fire-like quality of light in darkness. All of it is doing the work that fire does, for the part of you that is very old and knows what fire means. The second night is deep. Deeper, perhaps, than the first night felt, because you have earned this depth through the full day you have spent in the valley, through the long watching and the quiet listening and the slow calibration of your body to this place. You are in the night more completely than you were in the first night. And the night, which does not know the difference between a first night and a second night, continues to provide exactly what it always provides: the dark and the warm and the sound of the river and the voices of the insects and the slow arcs of the fireflies and the patient company of an ancient world doing what ancient worlds do. The rain comes without announcement. In the Jurassic, this is how rain always comes. There are no weather forecasts, no approaching fronts visible on any screen, no signal other than the slightly increased density of the air and the change in the quality of the smell from the forest that arrives, perhaps 15 minutes before the first drops. The smell of rain approaching in a Jurassic forest is the smell of water finding the dry surfaces of the world and promising them something. The first drops reach you through the canopy gaps, large and separate, each one a small cold surprise on the skin of your arm or the back of your hand. They are warm raindrops by the standards of rain you may have known in other contexts, because the air they fall through is warm and they have not had time to cool to the temperature of a cooler atmosphere. They feel like the rain that follows a summer afternoon in a place where summer means something, where summer is a whole commitment to warmth rather than simply a season on a calendar. And then the rain intensifies, not abruptly. The Jurassic, as you have come to understand, does not do abruptly, but steadily over the course of a few minutes. What was occasional drops becomes a continuous sound on the canopy above, a rushing, collective sound that drowns out the individual drop and becomes something more like a river but above, a river running over the surface of the leaves rather than the surface of the stone. The sound of Jurassic rain on forest canopy is one of the most complex sounds in the natural world. Not complex in the sense of being difficult to receive, it is deeply restful to receive, but complex in the architecture of it. The canopy is not a uniform surface. It is a layered, differentiated, biologically complex structure, and each leaf, each frond, each needle, each surface it contains responds to the rain in a slightly different way. The large, flat surfaces of the cycad fronds make a sound that is almost a slap, a light and regular percussion. The needles of the conifers make a sound that is more hissing, the drops fragmenting against the needles into smaller droplets that descend as a mist. The broad-leaved plants at the forest edge make a sound that is resonant, almost drum-like, the water collecting briefly in the curves of the leaves before running off in small streams. All of these sounds together create the rain sound, which is not one sound, but thousands of sounds, that your ears average into one sound the way your eyes average thousands of pixels into one image. The result is something that fills the auditory field completely, something that excludes nothing and overwhelms nothing, that is simply present everywhere at once, evenly distributed, evenly weighted, a white noise of water that has a texture to it, a specific warmth, a specific depth. You are under the conifer shelter, mostly protected by the canopy above, though some rain reaches you anyway. The drops that find the gaps and the channel drips that fall from in the lower branches. These arrivals are not unwelcome. They are cool and clean on the skin, and the smell they carry, the smell of rainwater that has passed through the specific chemistry of this forest canopy, is something you will not find any equivalent to in any other time or place. It is the smell of a world that has never been simplified. The river, below the clearing, changes its voice in the rain. The added water from the rainfall alters the pitch and volume of its conversation with the stones, not dramatically, not a flood, not an urgent rise, but a slight increase in confidence, a slightly more assured version of the sound it was already making. The rain-fed river is the same river but fuller, more completely itself. The way a voice sounds when it is not straining to be heard but simply speaking at the volume the room requires, small animals have taken shelter. The lizard-like creatures that were visible in the root systems before the rain began have retreated deeper into the spaces between the roots, tucking themselves into the driest available configurations. The beetles have found the undersides of leaves and the protected faces of the bark. The millipedes, which have their own relationship with moisture and are not as displaced by rain as some other creatures, continue their slow crossings of the forest floor, their many feet working the wet soil with the same patient efficiency they bring to the dry soil. The rain carries a temperature change with it. Not dramatic. The Jurassic does not do dramatic temperature changes in the same way that later, colder worlds will. But the air after the rain begins is perceptibly cooler than the air before it, and the coolness is welcome. It is the coolness of a world being refreshed, of surfaces that have been warm all day, receiving the gift of water, and releasing some of their stored heat into the wet air in exchange. The forest smells different in the rain, not just of the rain itself, but of everything the rain is releasing from the surfaces it touches. The complex organic chemistry of the bark and the leaf and the soil, activated by water, producing new compounds that drift into the air as fragrance. You breathe more deeply in the rain. This is not a decision. It is the body's automatic response to air that has been washed, to air that carries more of the information that the body knows how to read as good. The phytoncides from the conifers, the compounds that trees produce as part of their biological communication systems and that have, as a side effect, a measurable calming influence on the mammalian nervous system. The petrichor, the name that will eventually be given to the compound released by soil bacteria when water arrives, a compound that you have been responding to for your entire life without ever needing to know its name. The oxygen-rich, water-saturated air of a Jurassic rainstorm that is simply offering your lungs more of what they need and less of what they do not. What is the rain saying? This is not a useful question exactly. The rain is not saying anything. The rain is simply the result of the water cycle doing what it has done since there was water on this planet, evaporating from the ocean and the land surface under the warmth of the sun, rising into the atmosphere as vapor, cooling as it rises, condensing around particles of dust and pollen and organic material into droplets, gathering with other droplets until the gathering is heavy enough to fall back to the surface it rose from. The rain is chemistry and physics. It is not language, and yet, the sound of it on the canopy above, the smell of it in the air around, the cool touch of it on the skin when a drop finds its way through the shelter of the conifer, these things carry something that is not information in the sense of facts or data, but that arrives in the body as understanding. The understanding that the world is cycling, that things that go up come down, that water that leaves the river will return to the river, that what the sun took this morning the sky is giving back this evening, that cycles close, and in their closing complete something that was incomplete when they were open. The rain does not last long. Jurassic rain is often a fast and generous gift rather than an extended visitation. Perhaps an hour, perhaps less. It is difficult to track time in rain, because the sound of rain interrupts the ordinary cues that time is passing, the light changes and the temperature changes and the animal behaviors that normally mark the hours. In rain, those cues are suspended, and time becomes simply the duration of the rain, and the rain is its own duration, and when it ends, it will have been the right amount. The sound of rain slowing is as specific as the sound of rain beginning, though it moves in the opposite direction. The individual drops become audible again, through the collective sound. The sound on the cycad fronds becomes less dense, more sporadic. The dripping from the conifer branches continues for some time after the rain itself has ended, the accumulated water finding its way down through the branches and off the tips in slow drops that are larger than the raindrops, and make a deeper sound on the forest floor. This secondary rain, the rain of the forest releasing what the sky gave it, can last for an hour, a gentle, irregular, entirely peaceful continuation of what the actual rain began, the forest after rain, the specific quality of the world after rain, the sharpness of the smells, the freshness of the air, the slight gleam on every surface that has a surface to glean on. The river wider now by a small amount, its voice slightly deeper, its surface broken by the last drops from the canopy above, the fireflies resuming their arcs above the fern bank, their light slightly more visible against an atmosphere that has been washed clear of the day's particulate, the insects resuming their voices, slightly altered in frequency but present, always present, the consistent undertone of the Jurassic night. Sleep in the after rain. The air is the best it has been. The world is the cleanest it will be until the next rain. The temperature is exactly right. The sound of the forest releasing its water is rhythmic and slow and gentle and completely without urgency. There is nothing to attend to. There is only this, the after rain, the cleansed world. The night settling back into itself with the particular calm of a world that has just been refreshed. The smell of rain is present before the rain is present. This is because the smell is carried by the wind ahead of the rain, in the particular atmospheric dynamics of an approaching precipitation system. In the Jurassic, the wind that precedes rain comes from a different direction than the prevailing wind, carrying the cooler and more humid air of the rain system in a direction that is perceptible on the skin before it is perceptible in any other way. A slight change in the face of the wind. A faint dampness in the air that was not there moments before. The body registers this before the mind does, adjusting its posture almost imperceptibly, turning slightly in the direction of the incoming air as if to present more surface area to its approach. The plants register the incoming rain too. Before the first drop falls, the ferns around you shift slightly in the changing air, their fronds moving in a direction that is different from their movement in the ordinary breeze, a direction that responds to the different origin of this new air. The cycad fronds, stiffer and less responsive to ordinary air movement, do not shift as readily, but even they show something in the quality of their stillness, a stillness that is slightly more oriented, slightly more anticipatory than their usual stillness. Though plants do not anticipate in any conscious sense, they are thoroughly responsive, and what they are responding to now is the chemistry of the approaching rain, the specific mix of compounds in the humid air that their surface receptors are evolved to detect. And then the first drops. Each one as large as a small coin, warm from their passage through the warm Jurassic atmosphere, landing on the leaf surfaces with a sound that is specific to large drops on large leaves, a resonant slap that carries the mass of the drop and the tautness of the leaf surface in a brief, satisfying percussion. The fern fronds bow slightly under the weight of each large drop and then recover, nodding in sequence as the drops find them, a wave of small acknowledgements passing through the fern bank in the direction of the incoming rain. The interval between the first drops and the full rain is brief, perhaps 2 minutes, perhaps less. The drops accelerate, not in the speed of their fall, but in their frequency, the gaps between them shrinking until they are no longer individual events but a continuous happening, and the individual sounds merge into the composite sound that is rain on forest, rain on fern, rain on cycad, rain on the broad-leaved plants at the clearing's edge, rain on the river, which receives it with a slight increase in the complexity of its surface sound, as each drop adds its small circle of disturbance to the already disturbed surface. The smell that arrives with the full rain is the petrichor. This word will not exist for a very long time yet. But the smell will be the same smell, produced by the same chemical process, the geosmin released by the actinomycetes in the wet soil, combining with the aromatic oils released by the rain-struck plant surfaces to produce the specific compound fragrance that is the smell of rain arriving. Your ancestors, every one of them back through the long chain of descent, knew this smell. Your earliest warm-blooded ancestors knew it in the earliest mornings of their own emergence in the world. The smell goes very deep in the body's memory, deeper than language, deeper than concept, arriving in the place where sensations are simply themselves. Under the conifer shelter, the rain arrives as a modified experience. The canopy absorbs the full force of the first drops and returns them as a mist, a fine suspension of smaller droplets that drifts down through the branches rather than falling directly. The mist is cool against the skin in a way that the larger drops are not. It arrives without impact, simply settling onto exposed surfaces with the unhurried quality of fog. You feel it on your face and forearms as a slight coolness, a slight dampness, the specific sensation of fine water particles that are too small to feel as individual events but accumulate into a perceptible change in the condition of the skin. What the Jurassic does with rain is what all biological worlds do with rain. It uses it. Every surface that rain touches is a surface that had been, in some sense, waiting for rain, waiting for the mineral and chemical inputs that rain carries from the atmosphere, waiting for the physical action of rain that moves things, translocates particles, dissolves and redeposits and disturbs and settles. The soil receives the rain and is changed by it, its surface chemistry shifting in minutes in response to the influx of water. The roots of the conifers feel the moisture arriving in the soil as a change in the osmotic gradient around them and respond by adjusting their uptake. The river in the rain becomes something slightly different from the river without rain, not a different river. The same river, the same course, the same stones, but with a quality added. The rain adds its sounds to the river's sounds, and the combined sound is more complex, more layered, more richly textured than either alone. The river in the rain is the sound of water meeting stone, all three components contributing their distinct voices to a composite that is greater than any of them individually. You can listen to it for a long time without exhausting its complexity, because the complexity is continuously refreshed by the ongoing fall of rain and the ongoing response of the river to what is falling. The rain passes. This is the right phrase for how Jurassic rain ends. It passes. The rain system moves through the valley, carried by the wind that brought it, and exits through the far end of the valley without announcement. The drops do not gradually diminish in the way that some rain events diminish, becoming lighter and lighter until they are imperceptible. This rain simply reaches its trailing edge, and then is no longer present, leaving behind what it always leaves behind. The after rain, which is a specific and beautiful state of the world that is different from both the before rain and the during rain, and that has its own distinct qualities. The after-rain smell is the petrichor at its most concentrated. The soil is saturated with it. Every surface that the rain struck is releasing it. The aromatic compounds that were activated by the water continuing to be volatile in the now humid air, combining and recombining as they drift through the forest. The after-rain world smells more fully of itself than the before-rain world did, as though the rain has extracted from every surface the specific essence of that surface and released it into the air as fragrance, making the air into a kind of library of the forest's chemical identity. There is a presence in the valley tonight that changes the quality of the air without changing the temperature. It is not the stegosaur, which you have come to know as a presence that is simply itself, placid and enormous, and primarily concerned with the business of being a stegosaur. It is not the sauropods, whose presence has the quality of weather, of something vast and slow-moving that the rest of the world accommodates without particularly responding to. This presence has an edge to it, a directionality. Something in the night is organized around a purpose, and the purpose is moving. You become aware of it through the behavior of the small things first. This is always how it happens. The small things are sensors for the world, always attending to information that larger creatures, including you, might miss. The lizard-like creatures in the root system have gone very still. Not the hunting stillness of patient predation, but the other stillness, the one that is the body's decision to commit to silence and invisibility until whatever is moving in the dark has moved past. The insects continue, because insects continue regardless, but there is a subtle shift in the spatial distribution of their voices, a slight thinning in one direction, as though the air in that direction has become less hospitable to sound. The Allosaurus is on the far side of the valley. You cannot see it. You would not be able to see it even if it were closer, because the night is not bright enough and the forest is too dense. But you can hear it, now that you know to listen for it. Not a specific sound, not a roar or a call. The dramatic vocalizations belong to a different kind of storytelling about predators than the truth of what predators actually do at night. What you hear is a specific quality of the silence that surrounds it. The way the forest goes locally quiet for a moment as the animal passes through it, the way a wind moves through a field of grass, and the grass reveals the wind's path. The Allosaurus is, in the Jurassic landscape, one of the apex expressions of biological engineering toward a single purpose. Its body is designed across hundreds of millions of years of iterative refinement to do one thing supremely well. Not many things, in the way that generalist animals do many things adequately. One thing. Perfectly, or as close to perfectly as an imperfect biological medium can achieve. And that one thing is the efficient conversion of large prey animals into the energy required to sustain a body of this size and complexity. Its skull is a piece of functional architecture that would occupy an engineer for a long time. The eye sockets are large and forward-facing enough to provide significant binocular vision, the capacity to judge distance and depth in the three-dimensional landscape of prey capture. The jaws are long and lined with serrated teeth, designed not to grind or crush the way the teeth of herbivores are designed, but to penetrate and to hold, to create wounds that deplete rather than to immediately destroy. The arms, though shorter than the legs, are powerful and end in three curved claws that are useful for the securing of prey that is already down. Everything about it is for this. Every anatomical choice, over the entire span of its evolutionary history, has been evaluated against this single criterion, and yet, on this particular night, the Allosaurus is not hunting, or rather, it is doing what all predators do between hunts, which is moving, covering ground. Maintaining its knowledge of the territory it has been, over time and by right of presence, occupying, moving with a purpose that is not the sharp, gathering purpose of an active hunt, but the broader, slower purpose of an animal, whose relationship with its territory is one of continuous, patient monitoring. It is reading the valley the way you might read a familiar landscape, not for surprise but for change, for anything that has altered since the last time this ground was covered. The footsteps, when they reach you through the earth, are different from the sauropod's footsteps. The sauropod's steps have a quality of mass, of large weight settling into the ground with complete commitment. The Allosaurus steps, which are also large, have a different quality. They carry the mass, but with a specificity that the sauropod steps do not, a direction in each step, a intention. The weight is landing where it is intended to land, at the speed it is intended to land, in service of a trajectory that has been, however loosely, calculated. It passes along the river, on the far bank, following the water in the direction you have been watching it flow. In the dark, the river is a sound more than a sight, and the Allosaurus uses the river as a path the way travellers in many ages have used rivers, because water creates corridors through otherwise dense vegetation, because water draws the prey animals that the corridor leads to, because the river at night has its own kind of illumination, the sky's light gathered and returned from the moving surface, slightly brighter than the deep forest on either side. A drift of thought arrives, gentle as river mist. The Allosaurus does not know that the small animals in the root systems are holding their breath. It does not register the change in the insect voices, the slight thinning in its direction. It is simply moving in the dark, in its world, being what it is. And being what it is, completely and without any awareness that it might be other, is perhaps the most instructive thing about it. Every creature in this valley is, right now, doing the same thing, being entirely itself, without performance, without self-consciousness, without the layer of reflection that your own mind adds to your experience of being alive. Simply being. It is the oldest instruction there is. The sounds of the Allosaurus passing diminish in the way all sounds diminish when their source moves away, gradually, without drama. The local quality of the silence that surrounded it recedes with it, and the insect voices return to their full spatial distribution, and the lizard-like creatures in the root system release whatever was held in their stillness, and resume their small movements in the bark and the root crevices. The river continues, the fireflies continue, the night continues, as it was before, as it will be after, as it will always be in this valley for as long as this valley exists, and the night comes to it, and the living things within it respond to each other in the ways they have always responded. You feel, having witnessed this passage at a distance, something that is not quite relief and not quite awe. It is something more like gratitude. The Allosaurus passed on the far bank, in the dark, following the river, and did not turn in your direction, and the night absorbed its passage and returned to itself. And you are still here, warm in the fern bank, with the stars overhead, and the insects singing, and the fireflies marking their slow arcs above the river ferns. You are safe here. You have always been safe here. The Jurassic night is large enough to contain the Allosaurus and the Stegosaur, and the sauropods, and the pterosaurs, and the crocodilian in the deep pool, and the small mammal in the roots, and the fungi glowing faintly in the dead wood, and you, all of you together, with room for all of it, and the night still vast around it. The scale of this is something worth carrying with you into sleep. The Jurassic world is large enough that the apex predator of a valley can move through it in the night, and the small things can hold their breath and then resume breathing, and the river can continue, and the fireflies can continue, and you can continue lying here in the fern bank, and all of this can be true simultaneously, and none of it requires resolution. The Allosaurus has its path. The river has its path. The night has its path. And you have yours, which is into sleep, into rest, into the deep and wordless place where the body returns to itself, and the mind releases its hold on the management of things, and everything becomes very simple and very dark and very warm and very quiet. Let it pass. The Allosaurus has already passed. The valley is returning to what it was. The insects are full-voiced again. The lizard-like creatures are moving again in the roots. The river is speaking normally over its stones, and you are breathing normally too. You realize the slight shallowness that came with the awareness of the predator's proximity already resolved back into the deep and easy breathing that the Jurassic night has been offering since you arrived. This is the gift of distance, the gift of scale. In a world as large as this, the dangerous things and the peaceful things coexist without requiring the resolution of their contradiction. They simply occupy different parts of the world at the same time. And the skill of the living thing in any age is to know, with whatever instruments of knowledge it has been given, which part of the world it currently occupies. You are in the part with the ferns and the fireflies and the river and the stars. The Allosaurus is in the part with the river on the far bank and the dark forest beyond. Both parts are real, both are present, and the night holds all of it, generously, without preference, as the night has always held everything it has been given to hold. Sleep now. The valley is quiet. The predator has moved on. The small things are breathing again. The fungi are glowing in the dead wood. The river is saying its one thing in the dark. And the stars are enormous and numerous and old, and they've been here since long before any of this, and they will be here long after, and they are not keeping count, and they are not keeping watch, and they do not need you to be awake, and neither does anything else. And the night is long and warm and ancient and kind. The silence that follows the Allosaurus's passage is the silence of a world resuming itself, not performing silence, not demonstrating silence as though silence were an achievement, simply returning to the state that preceded the interruption, the way a pool of water returns to stillness after a stone has been thrown into it, the ripples moving outward and diminishing until the surface is again what it always was, a reflection of whatever is above it, a translation of whatever is below it. The Allosaurus that walked the far bank tonight was not a monster in any useful sense of the word. It was an animal. A biological entity shaped by the same processes that shaped everything else in this valley. The same processes that shaped the cycads and the fungi, and the crocodilian in the pool and the small mammals in the roots and you, lying in the fern bank watching the night return to its ordinary self. The Allosaurus is a member of the community of this valley, as legitimate a member as any other, with an ecological function as real and as necessary as the function of anything else here. The ecological function of the Allosaurus is to be expensive to be. The sauropods that feed in this valley are expensive to feed. They require enormous quantities of vegetation, and they process that vegetation slowly and somewhat inefficiently, which is to say that a significant portion of their biomass is available to other organisms if the sauropod can be taken. The Allosaurus is the organism that takes it, or attempts to, which keeps the sauropod population from growing beyond what the vegetation can support, which keeps the vegetation from being stripped, which keeps the soil from eroding, which keeps the river from silting, which keeps the river productive, which keeps the crocodilians and the fish viable, which keeps the entire community functioning. The Allosaurus does not know any of this. It does not know it is providing a service. It does not know it is part of a system. It does not know that its hunting has consequences that extend beyond the immediate outcome of any particular hunt. It simply hunts, as it has always hunted, as its ancestors hunted, following the imperatives of its own biology in the world its biology finds itself in. The ecological function is not something the Allosaurus performs. It is something the world extracts from the Allosaurus's existence. the way the world extracts the chemistry of decomposition from the fungi's existence, the way the world extracts the oxygen production from the plant's existence. The function exists at the level of the system. The individual is simply being itself. This is perhaps the most restful thing about the ecological view of the Jurassic world. When you see it as a system rather than as a collection of individual dramas, the tension that individual drama produces is replaced by something else. A sense of completeness. A sense of a thing that has found its balance and is maintaining it, not because any individual within it is trying to maintain it, but because the interactions of all the individuals together produce, as an emergent property, the balanced state. The Allosaurus is not trying to maintain the ecosystem. The sauropods are not trying to maintain it. The plants are not trying to maintain it. But the ecosystem is maintained. You are safe in the fern bank because you are not a target for anything in this valley. You are too small to be worth the effort of a large predator. You are too still to trigger the hunting responses of the small predators. You smell of the fern bank, which is to say you smell of fern and damp earth and the resinous quality of the conifer behind you, and these smells do not read to any of the valley's hunters as the smell of prey. You are, from the perspective of the valley's predators, simply part of the landscape, part of the texture of the night, as unworthy of attention as the root arch beside you or the stone beneath the fern bank, or the air that moves through the clearing without being anything specific. The stars have continued their slow rotation through the hours of the second night. You can confirm this by looking at the pattern above the gap in the canopy and comparing it to where the pattern was earlier. The Jurassic sky turns on the same axis that all future skies will turn on, the axis defined by the planet's rotation, the axis that all the planet's inhabitants have used, across all the ages of the planet's life, to navigate by the stars. The stars themselves are some of the same stars that will be visible from this same location in your own time, and some that will not, changed by the slow, proper motion of the stars themselves through the galaxy over the hundreds of millions of years between now and then. The distance between now and your own time is not something to think about tonight. It is too large for productive contemplation, too large to hold without a kind of vertigo that is not restful. Better to simply be here, in the now that is available, the now of the Jurassic Valley and the second night, and the stars turning and the river flowing and the predator long since gone down the valley following its own purposes. This now is sufficient. It always is. The night wind has changed direction slightly since the rain earlier in the evening. It comes from the north now, slightly cooler than it was, carrying the quality of air that has come from higher ground, air that has been in contact with the upper atmosphere before it descended into the valley. The coolness is pleasant against the face. It moves the fern fronds very gently, just enough to produce the softest possible version of the sound that ferns make when they move. A sound that is more rustle than rattle, more suggestion than statement. Sleep is close. It has been close for a while. The body has been preparing for it since the second night began, cycling through the stages that precede it, the gradual reduction in the background vigilance that waking requires, the slow settling of the systems that manage the body's relationship with the external world. The eyes, which have been the primary contact between you and the night, are growing less interested in what the night shows them. The ears, which have been parsing the valley's sounds all evening, are becoming less analytical, less interested in identification, and more interested in simple presence. The sounds are still there. They simply require less of you. The Jurassic world is a world of shallow seas. If you travelled, in this age, in almost any direction from where you are lying in this valley, you would, within days or weeks of walking, reach water. Not always the open ocean. Though the open ocean exists in its new and growing form, the early Atlantic still warm and shallow, barely committed to the scale it will eventually achieve, but shallow seas, inland seas, warm, calm, mineral-rich waters that cover what will one day be land, that fill the spaces between the drifting continents, that warm under the Jurassic sun to temperatures that support life in extraordinary density and diversity. The sea is not so far from here. A few days' walk to the west, the land descends toward a shallow marine embayment, warm and bright, its bottom visible through several meters of clear water in the places where the sediment has not been disturbed by the creatures that live there. The smell of that sea reaches this valley sometimes, in certain wind conditions, carried inland by the air that moves off the water in the late afternoon, when the land has warmed more than the sea, and the pressure gradient between them generates a consistent flow. You have smelled it, perhaps without fully recognizing it, a slight saltiness in the air that was not there at sunrise. A particular quality of the atmosphere in the hours before dusk that is different from the interior forest smell, something that carries within it the suggestion of distance, of vastness, of a horizon that does not stop at a tree line, but extends outward to where the sky meets the water, and the distinction between them becomes, from any shore, a matter of light rather than substance. In the shallow sea not far from here, at this same hour of the Jurassic night, the water is moving in its own rhythms. The tides, driven by the same moon that is presently above you, though the moon in the Jurassic is slightly larger in the sky than you are used to, slightly closer, the Earth and Moon still in the early stages of the gradual separating that will continue until your own time and beyond. The tides move in and out across the broad, flat shelf of the seafloor, exposing and covering, revealing and concealing, the way tides have always done, in the particular, reliable, uncomplicated choreography of celestial mechanics applied to water. The creatures of the Jurassic Sea are, in some respects, more alien to your experience than the dinosaurs of the land. The dinosaurs, whatever their size or form, are vertebrates, animals built on the same basic architectural plan that produced you. 4 limbs, or the descendants of 4 limbs, or the potential for 4 limbs, a spine, a skull, an interior skeleton around which the soft parts of the body are organized. The template is recognizable even when the expression of it is enormous or unusual. But the sea offers other templates. The ammonites, which fill the Jurassic Ocean in numbers that are difficult to conceptualize, are built on a plan that the vertebrate mind finds beautiful precisely because it is so different from the vertebrate plan. A coiled shell, logarithmically perfect, each chamber larger than the one before it in a ratio that is mathematical and constant and elegant, in the way that growth curves that follow mathematical laws are elegant. Within the outermost chamber, the living animal, a soft-bodied cephalopod, whose tentacles trail below and around the shell's opening. The ammonite navigates the water by controlling the gas-to-liquid ratio in its internal chambers, adjusting its buoyancy with a precision that any submarine engineer would recognize as sophisticated. There are ichthyosaurs in the deeper water. They are sleeping now, in their way, the dolphin-like rest of air-breathing marine animals that must surface periodically to breathe, but can reduce their metabolic rate enough in between breaths to sustain long periods of relative inactivity near the surface. They are fish-shaped, but not fish, having arrived at a fish-shaped body through a completely different evolutionary path, having started as land animals and returned to the sea and been remodeled, over long geological time, toward the hydrodynamic ideal that the ocean rewards with survival. Their calves are with them. The ichthyosaurs bear live young in the open water, having long since abandoned any connection to the shore. The calves are smaller versions of the adults, already capable of swimming, already adapted to the sea in every way that adaptation requires, already committed to the water as their entire world. They swim beside their mothers in the warm dark of the Jurassic Ocean, their small bodies mimicking the larger body's movements, the learning that happens in the relationship between what is young and what is experienced happening here, in the sea, exactly as it happens on land, through proximity and example, and the gradual discovery of what works. The plesiosaurs are hunting. They hunt at all hours, but the night has a specific quality for them, the way it has a specific quality for the small theropods on land. The reduced visibility that the night brings does not disadvantage the plesiosaur the way it might disadvantage a visual predator that relies primarily on sight. The plesiosaur reads the water in multiple ways simultaneously. The vibrations that fish and cephalopods create in the water as they move, the electrical fields that living creatures generate, and that the plesiosaur's lateral line system, a sensory array that runs along the side of its body, can detect with extraordinary precision at close range. The plesiosaur moves through the dark water with a specific grace. Its 4 flippers move in alternating pairs, generating thrust through a motion that researchers will describe, much later, as underwater flight. The body is remarkably stable in the water, the long neck extending ahead of the barrel-shaped torso, the small head sweeping slowly from side to side in that continuous reading of the water's electrical and vibrational content. When it finds what it is looking for, the response is swift and precise. A specific deployment of the neck in a direction that the head has already computed will intersect with the prey's trajectory. What would it be to inhabit the sea of the Jurassic? To be carried by water on all sides, not above and below as the land animal is held by gravity, but in every direction at once, suspended in a medium that is both the road and the destination, the environment and the element. To breathe water, to read water, to move through water as the plesiosaur moves through it, with the conviction of a thing that has never known anything else and could not imagine needing to. The sea calms things. Even the thought of the sea from this inland valley, with the smell of it occasionally in the air and the awareness of its presence somewhere beyond the tree line to the west, has a calming quality. The sea is the oldest thing. Older than the dinosaurs, older than the forest, older than the land itself. The sea is where all of this came from. The sea is where the first life organized itself out of chemistry. The sea is where the first eyes opened, and the first mouths formed, and the first spines stiffened against the pressure of the water, and the first creatures began the long, improbable journey toward the complexity of a world that would one day contain, among other things, a person lying in a fern bank listening to the river and thinking about the sea. There is a sound the ocean makes at night, in the shallow bays of the Jurassic, that is different from the river sound, and different from the rain sound, and different from any other sound in this world. It is the sound of the tide, of water gathering itself and moving in a direction for hours at a time, and then gathering itself and moving in the opposite direction. It is the sound of the moon pulling the sea toward it, slowly, across the surface of the earth, with a patience that is not patience because it is not conscious and cannot feel the time passing, but that is the temporal expression of gravitational patience, which is the most fundamental kind there is. The sound of the tide is the sound of the most basic things, mass and gravity and time and water, the four things that the universe organized first, before it organized anything as complex as life. The tide does not care about the ammonites in the water it moves. It does not care about the ichthyosaurs sleeping near the surface, or the plesiosaurs hunting in the dark below. It simply moves, as it has always moved, as it will always move, for as long as there is an ocean and a moon, and the gravitational relationship between them that makes the tide possible. You can hear the ocean tonight, faintly if you are quiet enough. Or perhaps you are only hearing the quality of the air that has come from it, the slight saltiness in the breath of the valley, the small way the night smells different with the sea in it. Either way, it is there. The sea is always there, in the Jurassic, not far from anywhere, and it is calm tonight. It is deeply and fundamentally calm, as the sea is calm when there is no storm, when the moon is not full enough to pull the tide to extremes, when the water and the air above it have reached an agreement about temperature and pressure that makes the surface of the sea the most restful thing in the world to imagine lying on, held by the salt, surrounded by the warm, dark water, rocked by the slow movement of the tide. Let the sea be there. Let it be calm. Let the ammonites continue their patient spiral navigation of the dark water. Let the ichthyosaurs breathe slowly near the surface. Let the plesiosaurs do their quiet work in the depths. Let the tide move as it moves, in the direction it is moving, on the schedule it has always kept. The sea does not need you to attend to it. The sea has been fine without your attention since long before there were things with attention to give. It will continue to be fine, and you will rest, here in the valley, with the sea's breath in the air around you and the river below and the stars above, and the night doing its faithful, reliable, ancient work. The smell of the sea reaches the valley tonight on a different current than the one you noticed earlier. Earlier in the day, the sea smell came from the west, carried by the prevailing afternoon flow. Tonight it comes from the south, where the embayment that lies in that direction is larger and warmer and closer to the valley than the western sea, and the night air carries its particular salinity inland, with the specific quality of marine air that has travelled some distance over land before arriving. It is not the sharp salt of a coastal beach in your experience. It is more complex than that, carrying within it the biological richness of a shallow warm sea, the compounds released by the enormous quantities of marine life that exist in those waters. The Jurassic Ocean is a different ocean from the ocean you know. Not in its fundamental nature, which is water and salt and the chemistry of life, but in its content. The warm, shallow seas of the Jurassic contain communities of organisms that have no equivalent in your experience, that fill ecological niches with forms that are not the forms you would expect those niches to fill. The ammonites are everywhere in the shallow seas, in their logarithmic coils, in their hundreds of species, in their extraordinary abundance. They are the common background organism of the Jurassic Ocean, the way plankton is the common background organism of the ocean, you know. What moves through the ammonite communities in the dark of the Jurassic Sea is worth imagining. The belemnites, which are cephalopods like the ammonites but without the external coiled shell, swim through the water in schools that can number in the thousands, their streamlined bodies cutting through the dark water in the same fluid motion they use in the light. Because the belemnite's eyes are adapted to low light, the pupils capable of opening to allow the maximum possible light to enter for processing. They hunt in the dark sea the way the small theropods hunt in the dark forest, by reading the information in the water rather than by seeing their targets. The pliosaurs and the ichthyosaurs that share the Jurassic Ocean with the smaller creatures are among the most highly adapted predators that the oceans have ever contained. Not the largest, by the measures of later ages, but highly specialized, built to a precision that makes the word predator inadequate. They are the ocean's processing engines, taking the enormous biological productivity of the warm, shallow, mineral-rich water and converting it, through a process of sequential consumption and conversion, into the apex biomass of the top trophic level. At night, the ocean surface has a quality that the day surface does not have. The bioluminescence that is present in the Jurassic Ocean's microbial communities creates a faint glow in the water, a blue-green light that is too dim to see clearly from any distance, but that gives the water, when you are in it or very near it, a quality of being illuminated from within. The bow wave of a swimming ichthyosaur would be lit by this bioluminescence, the disturbed water releasing the chemical signals that trigger the light-producing bacteria, so that the predator's passage through the water would be marked by a brief trail of cold light, visible to anyone positioned correctly to see it, fading as the bacteria return to their dormant state. The tides of the Jurassic Sea move with a slightly different rhythm than the tides of your time. The moon is closer, as was mentioned, and the tidal range is slightly greater. The difference between high and low water, covering more distance up the beach and across the tidal flat than the equivalent beaches of your experience would show. This greater tidal range exposes and covers larger areas of the shallow shelf on each cycle, creating more extensive intertidal communities, more extensive zones where the marine and the terrestrial meet and produce the specific biology of that meeting. The creatures of the Jurassic intertidal are extraordinarily adapted to a life of twice-daily alternation between water and air. The organisms that live in the zone between the highest and lowest tide marks must be capable of surviving, for hours at a time, in conditions that are neither fully aquatic nor fully terrestrial, that require both the ability to extract oxygen from water and the ability to prevent fatal water loss in air, that must withstand the physical force of waves arriving and departing across their substrate, that must anchor themselves against the pull of the retreating tide and the push of the arriving one. The sea tonight is calm by the standards of what the Jurassic Sea is capable of. The Jurassic world is a world of active tectonics, active volcanism, active weather systems, driven by a warmer and more energetic atmosphere than the one that will eventually settle over the planet. The seas of the Jurassic can be dramatic. The storms that move across them can generate waves of considerable size, can move significant volumes of water across significant distances, can redistribute the biological communities of the shallow shelf in ways that require weeks or months of recovery. But tonight, the sea is calm. The low-pressure system that brought the rain earlier in the evening has passed south, and what remains is the gentle aftermath, a sea in the post-storm settling that is its most serene state. Let the sea be at peace. Let the ammonites continue their patient spiral navigation through the dark water. Let the ichthyosaurs breathe slowly near the surface, their nostrils above the waterline, their eyes just below it, watching both worlds simultaneously from the boundary between them. Let the plesiosaurs do whatever plesiosaurs do in the deep dark of the night ocean, that patient and effective hunt that has sustained their lineage for millions of years and will sustain it for millions more. Let the tide continue its reliable exchange with the shore, carrying in and carrying out, in the rhythm that the moon imposes and the sea accepts without resistance. The sea is always there, even in the deepest forest, even in the furthest interior of the continent. The sea is always there in the background of the world, the reservoir from which all rain is drawn, the destination to which all rivers are flowing, the beginning of the water cycle that generates the air you breathe, and the rain that fell this evening, and the river that sounds below the fern bank. Everything connects back to the sea. The fern you are lying on was fed by water that was once seawater. The air you are breathing was partly produced by organisms that live in the sea. You are, in the most literal material sense, a creature of the sea, even here, even in the inland valley, even in the Jurassic night. The small hours are a specific quality of time. They exist in every world that has a night, in every civilization that has ever organized itself around the rhythm of light and dark. The small hours are the hours after the middle of the night and before the first suggestion of dawn, the hours when the night is most fully itself, most committed to its own character, most uninfluenced by what came before it or what will come after. In the Jurassic, the small hours have the same quality they will have in every world that comes after. The quality of the deepest point. The nadir of the day cycle, where everything that is done in the complete dark, and everything that is not done is left undone until the light returns. The river is at its quietest in the small hours. This is not simply an observation about volume. The river in the small hours has a different quality of sound. A sound that seems to originate not at the river's surface but from somewhere within the stone beneath it, as though the river and the riverbed have found a mode of conversation that does not involve the surface at all, a quiet agreement between water and rock that happens below the threshold of disturbance, below the threshold of any motion you could call movement. The river in the small hours sounds like it is thinking. The fireflies have reduced their number, not gone. In the Jurassic, there is rarely a complete absence of bioluminescence at any point in the night, because too many organisms produce it for coincidence to eliminate it entirely. But fewer now. The ones that remain move more slowly, if that is possible. Their arcs even longer and more gradual than they were in the earlier hours of the night, as though the light production is becoming more effortful and they are being more selective about when to commit to it. You are aware of your own breathing in the small hours in a way that is not alarming but is specific. In the fuller hours of the night, when the forest was more active and the insects more vocal and the river at its normal conversational pitch, your breathing was simply one of many rhythms, absorbed into the general rhythm of the living world around you. In the small hours, your breathing is more present to you. Each inhalation carries the specific compound smell of the Jurassic night air, the wet earth, the conifer resin, the cycad's slight mineral tang, the distant suggestion of the river, the very faint salt of the far sea. Each exhalation is warm against the cooler air, a small column of warmth that rises and disperses into the dark above your face. This awareness of breath is ancient. It is among the most ancient forms of self-awareness available to any creature complex enough to be aware. The body knowing that it is breathing, noting the rhythm of it, able to feel the difference between the breath that is shallow and the breath that is deep, between the breath that is tight and the breath that is easy. In the small hours, the breath becomes easy almost on its own. The deepest point of the night has its own chemistry, its own hormonal and neurological pattern in the mammalian body, and that pattern is the pattern of maximum readiness for rest. The body is asking you to sleep. It has been asking all night, patient as the river, and in the small hours the asking is at its most insistent, which is also its most gentle. What is the darkness of the small hours doing? This question has been asked in every age, by every consciousness capable of waking in the deep night, and finding itself in the presence of a darkness that is more complete than the dark of early night. The answer, which is not really an answer but a description, is that the darkness of the small hours is doing nothing. It is not building toward anything. It is not preparing for the day to come. It is simply the darkness, existing in the fullest possible expression of itself, occupying the spaces between the stars and the spaces beneath the forest canopy and the spaces behind your closed eyelids with equal and comprehensive thoroughness. And this nothing that the darkness is doing is perhaps the most useful thing any environment has ever done for a living creature in need of rest, because the nothing requires nothing of you. You do not need to respond to it. You do not need to evaluate it. You do not need to incorporate it into any system of meaning or purpose. The darkness of the small hours is simply there, as a kind of negative space that the body can expand into, releasing the vigilance and the maintenance and the constant small adjustments that waking requires, letting the systems that need darkness to recover in darkness, letting the body become temporarily the least complicated version of itself. There are sounds in the small hours that you have not heard before. This is not because they are new. They have been occurring throughout the night, but in the quieter attention of the small hours they become audible in a way they were not before. The small, continuous sound of moisture moving through the leaf litter, the occasional pop of wood contracting in the cooling air, something that might be a very distant call from very far away, arriving so attenuated that it is more sensation than sound, more a change in the quality of the silence than an addition to it. The stars have moved. You can tell this by comparing their positions to the outline of the conifer canopy against the sky. The sky has rotated, as it always rotates, as it has rotated since the Earth first began to turn, carrying all the stars with it in their apparent slow progression from east to west. The particular pattern of stars that was directly overhead when you first lay down in the clearing has moved toward the western horizon, and a different pattern is overhead now, stars you could not see earlier because they were on the wrong side of the sky. The night has been long. The night has done its work. Something has changed in the quality of your body's relationship with the ground beneath you. Not the fern bank, which has been consistently soft and cool and present. Something more interior than that. The relationship between the body's weight and the surface that supports it, which in the early hours of any rest involves some residual tension, some monitoring of comfort and position, has simplified. The monitoring has largely ceased. The weight has settled completely. The places where the body makes contact with the ground are no longer the sites of attention they were earlier. They are simply the places where the body rests, and the rest is complete, and the night supports everything. In the deepest part of the small hours, a quality of silence arrives that is different from the earlier silences. This is not the silence between sounds. This is a silence that contains everything that could be called sound, that absorbs it and holds it and returns it subtly altered, as though the night itself has become a resonator for the things that happen within it. The river is still audible, but it sounds like something heard from a great distance, or from behind a curtain, or from the edge of a sleep that is not quite complete but is very close to complete. A micro-hook, gentle as breath. In this deepest silence, what are the sauropods dreaming? They are not dreaming in any way you would recognize as dreaming, but in their enormous bodies, in the dark of the forest where they have settled for the small hours, processes are occurring that share enough with your dreaming to warrant the word. Memory consolidation, in the biological sense, the chemical reinforcing of the pathways that today's experience has worn more deeply into the neural substrate. The sorting of information, the clearing of certain cues and the maintenance of others. The body doing, in the hours of rest, the work that the hours of waking cannot accommodate. And you are doing the same thing, here in the fern bank, in the small hours of the Jurassic night. Whatever today has been, whatever today has offered and demanded and provided and taken, is being processed now, quietly, below the threshold of consciousness, in the way that the river processes the water it carries, taking what needs to be deposited and letting the rest continue downstream, making of the accumulated experience something that the morning will receive slightly differently arranged than it was when you arrived. The small hours are generous hours. They ask nothing and they provide everything. They provide the darkness and the quiet and the cool air, and the sound of the river and the faint glow of the fungi in the dead wood, and the remaining fireflies in their slow arcs, and the breathing of the forest in the wind far above, and the warmth of the ground beneath in the great, star-filled sky overhead. They provide all of this without commentary, without instruction, without the implication that any of it means anything beyond what it is, which is the night, which is enough. Let the small hours do what the small hours do. Let your body become what the body becomes when it has finally, completely, and without reservation, let go of the day. Let the Jurassic night hold you in its small hours, as it has held everything that has ever spent a night in this valley, with complete and democratic generosity. The river is below, the stars are above, the forest is on all sides, and the night is full, and the night is dark, and the night is complete, and the night is kind. Somewhere in the valley, in the deep dark of the forest, a small mammal has found an insect. It eats quickly in the way that small mammals eat, with the efficiency of something whose metabolic needs are constant, and whose supply is always marginal, and whose survival depends on taking every opportunity. It eats, and the insect is gone, and the small mammal continues into the dark with its tiny, urgent heartbeat, alive in the small hours of the Jurassic with the same commitment it brings to every other hour. never knowing, because it cannot know, that the particular design of its persistence will one day lead, through very long chains of descent and modification, to everything. In the small hours, the world's biological activity is at its lowest ebb. Not zero. Never zero in a world as alive as this one. But reduced to its baseline, to the activities that cannot wait for morning, to the hungers and the vigilances and the metabolic imperatives that do not recognize the hour as an hour of diminished expectation, but simply as another hour in which the organism must do what organisms must do. The small mammal in the root system is still hunting. Its metabolic rate, which is very high by the standards of anything that lives here, requires it to feed almost continuously during its waking hours. It cannot afford to stop eating for any significant interval. Its tiny heart, beating at a rate that would exhaust larger animals in minutes, requires a constant supply of calories to maintain itself. It is the most urgent creature in the valley at this hour, the one operating under the tightest margin, and yet it operates with the same basic quality that everything here operates with, without drama, without evident distress, simply doing what needs to be done at the pace it needs to be done. The river in the small hours is the river at its most essential. All the day's interactions with the world have been reduced or removed. The sauropods are not drinking, the theropods are not hunting its shallows, the pterosaurs are not skimming its surface, the rain is not disturbing it. It runs with only the stone to respond to, only the gradient of the land to follow, only the long-established logic of its own course to obey. This is the river unwitnessed, or as close to unwitnessed as a river gets in a world that is always alive. And in this unwitnessed state it is itself more completely than at any other hour. There is a philosophy in this that has never been written down, that will not be written down for millions of years, that may not be written down at all in the forms that philosophy eventually takes. The philosophy is simply this: a thing is most completely itself when it is not being observed. When the observation is removed, the thing does not become more or less, does not perform or withhold. It is simply, quietly, completely the thing it is. The river at midnight is the truest river. The forest at midnight is the truest forest. The dark earth beneath the ferns at midnight is the truest earth. You are moving toward being the truest version of what you are in the small hours too. The waking self, the self that organizes and plans and observes and interprets, is withdrawing, moving toward its nightly rest, making room for what is underneath it. And what is underneath it is something older and simpler and more fundamental, the basic biological being that precedes the self and will outlast it. The body doing its body things in the dark, breathing and circulating and maintaining and repairing, doing all the work that the waking self does not have to attend to, because the body has always known how to do it without supervision. The temperature in the valley has reached its nightly minimum. Not cold. Nothing in the Jurassic is what you would call cold by the standards of a world with winter, but the coolest the air will be in this cycle, the temperature at which all the day's warmth has been returned to the atmosphere, and the atmosphere itself is at the lowest point of its daily energy budget. The soil is still slightly warmer than the air, still giving back the last of what it borrowed from yesterday's sun, a warmth that rises imperceptibly through the fern mat beneath you as an almost indistinguishable additional comfort. The stars have never been brighter than they are in the small hours. This is partly because the eyes have had hours to adapt to the dark, the pupil at maximum dilation, the retina at maximum sensitivity, and it is partly because the atmospheric moisture that was present in the hours around the rain has largely settled out, leaving the air cleaner and more transparent than it was. The starlight arrives through less interference than at any other point of the night. Each star is a slightly more precise point of light than it was at the beginning of the evening. The sky is a deeper black between them. What are you, lying here in the small hours of the Jurassic? You are a temporarily organized collection of atoms that found each other in a sequence that began with the Big Bang and continued through the formation of stars and the formation of the solar system and the formation of the Earth and the development of the first organic molecules and the first cells and the first multicellular organisms and the first vertebrates and the first land vertebrates and the long, patient sequence of modifications and refinements that eventually produced the specific design of organism that you are. You are very old, in the sense of the materials you are made of, and you are very young, in the sense of the arrangement those materials are currently in. And you are temporary, in the sense that the arrangement will not persist indefinitely. None of this is troubling in the small hours. In the small hours, it is simply description, simply the honest accounting of what is the case. You are here and you are made of old materials, and the arrangement is temporary, and the night is dark and warm and full of sounds that your ancestors have responded to with safety and rest since before language existed to describe them. This is enough. This is more than enough. This is, in fact, everything that the small hours require of you, which is the same as what they require of everything else in this valley. Simply to be here, in the hour that is, as exactly and completely as you can manage. Morning is coming, not soon, not yet. But it is coming with the certainty that everything that has ever been morning has always come with, the certainty of a physical process that does not know how to fail, that has succeeded without interruption since the planet first began to rotate, and the line between day and night first began to sweep across its surface. The morning is coming, patient and reliable, on the other side of the remaining dark. And the remaining dark is quiet and warm and full of the sounds that mean the world is continuing, and there is no better place to rest than here, in the valley, in the Jurassic, in the small hours, with the morning coming. There is a dream that the world has been dreaming for as long as there has been a world. It is not a dream in the way that sleeping minds dream, with narrative and image and the surreal logic of the unconscious. It is a dream in the sense of something continuous and uninterrupted and larger than any individual moment of it, something that contains all the moments of it simultaneously, the way a river contains all of its water simultaneously, all of it flowing in the same direction at the same time, all of it continuous with what preceded it and what follows it. The world's dream is the dream of life, of the continuous, patient, improbable project of living things, maintaining themselves against entropy, against the universe's tendency toward disorder and simplicity, organizing matter and energy into structures of extraordinary complexity that persist for a time and then dissolve and are reorganized by the next generation of structures, each time losing something and gaining something else, each time the same project in a slightly different form. In the Jurassic, the dream is at one of its most elaborate expressions. The diversity of life here, the range of forms and sizes and strategies and relationships that the biological world has developed in the approximately 4 billion years since the project began, is extraordinary. Not the most diverse the world will ever achieve, not the most complex, but fully itself, fully committed to its own version of the dream, with the sauropods and the stegosaurs and the pterosaurs and the ammonites and the small mammals in the root systems and the fungi and the dead wood, all participating in their different ways in the same ongoing project. What does the world dream about? It does not dream about anything. The world is not a mind. It does not have preferences or fears or hopes. But if you were to describe the world's long project in the language of human dreams, you might say it dreams about continuity, about the next moment being there, about the offspring surviving, what the parents survived, about the chain of transmission continuing, genetic and ecological and chemical, carrying the accumulated knowledge of survival forward into a future that is always, from the perspective of any single moment, unknown. You are part of the dream, not as the dreamer, as one of the things that the dream is producing in this particular moment of its long history. The particular arrangement of matter and energy and complexity that you are tonight, lying in the fern bank of a Jurassic valley, represents one of the dream's current experiments. Not its most elaborate, not its most complex. You are small and brief and fragile by the standards of some of what the dream has produced, but fully part of it, continuous with it, made of the same materials that the dream has always worked with, organized by the same fundamental forces that the dream has always employed. There is something in this that is deeply restful, if you let it be. The sense of being part of something larger than the individual, not in the romantic or spiritual sense of those words, which often carry more weight than they can bear. In the simple, literal, material sense. You are made of atoms that have been here since the beginning, atoms that have been through many previous arrangements, that will be through many subsequent ones. You are made of water that has been in this river, in this ocean, in the atmosphere above this forest. You are built from the same carbon compounds that the life of the Jurassic is built from, organized differently but from the same foundational materials in service of the same foundational project. The Jurassic night knows this. In whatever way that a night can know something, the air knows it, carrying in its carbon atoms the carbon that organisms have exhaled since the first organisms existed. The soil knows it, containing in its mineral matrix the remains of every living thing that has died in this place since the forest first grew here. The river knows it, carrying downstream the dissolved mineral legacy of the rock it has been working on for long enough that the rock remembers what it felt like to be lifted from the mantle and is not yet ready to be rock again. The dream continues while you rest. This is perhaps its most important quality. The world's dream does not require your participation to continue. The river does not need your help to flow. The fungi do not need your help to decompose the wood. The small mammals do not need your encouragement to pursue their insects. The pterosaurs, sleeping now in whatever way pterosaurs sleep, will wake without assistance and take to the air again when the morning thermals provide the conditions for taking to the air. The dream goes on without any individual dreamer, because it is not a dream that any individual is having. It is something older and larger than that. And in the going on, it provides something. The continuity of it provides something. The sense that you can rest, completely and without reservation, and that the world will still be here when you are done resting, continuing its long project in your absence the way it continued it before you arrived, provides something. The sense that rest is not an interruption of something important but is itself something important, is itself part of the project, the world's long dream, accommodating and requiring the rest of its participants in the same way that the river requires the rain that feeds it, and the rain requires the ocean that evaporates to produce it, and the ocean requires the rivers that flow to it, and the rivers require the rain. You are in the cycle. You have always been in the cycle. Tonight, in the fern bank of the Jurassic Valley, you are in the most ancient and uncontested version of the cycle. Before the cycles became complicated by the things that complicated them, when the cycle was simply, the light comes, the creatures wake, the dark comes, the creatures rest, the rain comes, the plants drink, the plants grow, the herbivores eat, the herbivores flourish, the predators eat. The predators and the herbivores and the plants and the fungi and the bacteria and the microorganisms all die, and the soil deepens and the cycle continues. Carry this with you into sleep, not as a thought to think, but as a quality to inhabit. The quality of being in the cycle and not against it. The quality of resting because the world has made a place for rest in its long project, and the place is here and now, and the place is this. The fern bank, the river below, the stars above, the forest on all sides, the world's dream continuing all around you, in the voices of the insects and the glow of the fungi, and the breathing of the great conifers and the movement of the small mammals in the roots, and the slow chemistry of the soil and the flowing of the river toward the sea. The night has its own kind of knowledge, not knowledge in the human sense, not stored and retrievable and portable, but a different kind of knowing that is structural rather than stored. The night knows how to cool, how to grow quiet, how to make space for the things that need space to exist, the fungi and the moths and the small mammals and the slow chemical work of the soil. The night has been doing this for as long as there has been a night to do it, and it does it the same way every time, with the same thoroughness and the same indifference to whether any particular creature notices or appreciates the doing. There is a particular quality to deep forest air in the last quarter of the night. It has moved through so many leaves, absorbed so many exhalations from the soil and the bark and the standing water in the root hollows, that it carries a complexity that the air of more open places does not carry. You breathe in the Jurassic forest's own particular breath, the accumulated respiration of millions of organisms filtering through the air column above you, each adding something, each taking something, the whole exchange so slow and continuous that it functions as a kind of background hum of chemistry that the body registers without the mind needing to name it. The stars have moved through the sky while you have been here, not dramatically, not in any way that announces itself. But if you were attending to the position of any particular bright star when you first arrived in the fern bank, and you looked now, you would see that it has moved in its slow arc across the sky's dome, tracking the rotation of the planet below it, which has been rotating with the same patient consistency it always has, unaware of everything happening on its surface. The planet's rotation is older than the Jurassic by orders of magnitude. It was rotating before the first organism existed to be rotated on. The ferns themselves are in a kind of stillness now. The breeze that moved through them in the earlier hours has quieted. The thermal patterns of the valley floor settled into a more stable configuration, as the surface temperature and the air temperature have reached a kind of temporary equilibrium. In the stillness, the ferns hold their fronds in exactly the positions they have grown them into, positions that are the accumulated result of millions of years of selection for the angle and orientation most likely to catch the available light. Even in the dark, the ferns are positioned for the light that will come. They grow towards something they cannot see from where they are, but that they are designed to find. This is the nature of the biological world that surrounds you. Everything in it is positioned for what is coming. Not because anything in it can predict or anticipate in the way that a mind predicts and anticipates, but because the things that were not positioned for what was coming are no longer here, and the things that are here precisely because their ancestors happened to be positioned well. The fern is positioned for the light. The small mammal's internal clock knows approximately when dawn is coming. The sauropod's body knows it needs water and goes to the river. All of this positioning, all of this readiness, without any of it being planned, you can let this be restful too. The knowledge that the biological world manages its readiness without effort, that the preparation for what comes next is built into the structure of things, rather than requiring constant conscious maintenance. Your own body has this quality. It has been managing your temperature, your breathing, your circulation, all the quiet interior work of keeping you alive and warm and present in this fern bank, without asking for your attention or your supervision. The body knows how to do this. It has always known. The knowledge is older than the thinking mind. The stone beneath the ferns has been here for a long time. Longer than the ferns, longer than the conifers, longer than anything biological that is currently alive in this valley. The stone was here before the valley was a valley, before the river decided this was where it would run, before the first seed of the first conifer fell from some earlier generation of trees in some earlier version of this place. The stone was here before the Jurassic itself began, laid down in an even older time by processes that the Jurassic does not concern itself with, any more than the present concerns itself with the Jurassic. The stone is warm against the fern roots. The warmth it holds is the warmth of today's sun, borrowed from the light and returned slowly, patiently, over the long hours of the night. By the small hours, the stone's warmth is subtle, not the direct warmth of midday, something more interior than that, a warmth that comes from deep in the stone rather than from its surface, the warmth of something that has been holding heat for long enough that the heat has become part of it rather than something deposited on it from outside. This is the warmth beneath you now, ancient and deep and patient. The warmth of the Jurassic Earth, carrying the day's sun through the night in the way that Earth has always carried it, in the way it will carry it long after the Jurassic is a layer of stone in a longer sequence of layers, in the way it will carry it into the morning that is coming, slowly but coming, on the other side of this deepest part of the dark. The world dreams on. You rest within the dream. The river flows through the dream, carrying it toward the sea. The stars move through the sky above the dream, as indifferent and as beautiful as they have always been. And the night holds all of it, all of this enormous, patient, ancient project of matter, organized into life, organized into experience, organized into rest, with the same generosity it has always used to hold whatever the world has given it to hold. Rest. Rest completely. The dream will be here. The world will be here. The morning will be here when the morning comes. And the morning is coming, but slowly, on the far side of this deepest dark. And there is time, and there is time, and there is nothing else required of you except this, which you are already doing, already inhabiting, already breathing into and out of, again and again, in the rhythm that the night has prepared for you and that your body has always known. The dawn in the Jurassic is a slow event. It does not arrive suddenly. The sky in the east does not simply open. The change is gradual and comes in layers, each layer revealing something the previous darkness had kept in reserve, as though the world is presenting itself in stages, making sure each element is ready before allowing the next to be seen. The first layer of dawn is a change in the quality of the black. If you are very awake and paying close attention, which you may not be, which is perfectly acceptable, you can detect the moment when the sky's black begins to carry a very slight distinction between north and east. A subtlety so subtle it could be a change in your perception rather than a change in the world, and perhaps it is both. Perhaps dawn is always both. The insects respond first. Not all of them, and not loudly, and not in any way that announces itself as a response. But the quality of the insect sound shifts in the eastern direction first, the way a fire adjusts when a draft arrives from one side, and then the shift moves through the full circle of the valley's insect voice. And the quality of the sound in the 4th hour of the morning is slightly different from the quality of the sound in the 3rd hour, and the difference is the beginning of dawn. The birds, or the bird-adjacent creatures of the Jurassic, are the next to register it. A single call, from somewhere high in the canopy to the east, brief and high and clear, the sound of something that was dormant and has just become aware that the conditions for activity are approaching. Not the full bird chorus of a later world, not the sustained and layered dawn chorus that will develop over the long arc of bird evolution. Just one voice, high and brief, announcing that it is still here and that it has noticed. Then a second voice, from a different direction. Then a third. None of them are the same. The calls are different in pitch and pattern and duration, the product of different creatures attending to the approaching light from different positions in different canopy trees. They are not responding to each other exactly, though the relationship between them is not pure coincidence. They are each responding to the same stimulus, and the simultaneous responding creates a kind of conversation without any of the participants intending conversation. The river changes next. The river does not change its sound dramatically. The pitch and volume of moving water over stone is determined by physical factors that do not shift with the light. But the river is also a reflective surface, and as the eastern sky begins to hold more light, the river's surface begins to do more with that light, to gather it and return it, to shift from a dark surface to a pale one, to go from something you know is there because you can hear it, to something you can additionally, just barely, see. The seeing of the river in the first light of dawn is one of the simplest, beautiful things in this world. The water catches the pale grey of the pre-dawn sky and carries it along the length of the river's visible stretch, a long moving band of pale grey in the darkness of the valley, a line that traces the path of the water through the landscape in a way that the darker hours could only suggest. The shapes of the rocks in the shallows become visible, not as details but as darker interruptions in the pale surface. Small darknesses within the larger pale. The light continues to arrive. Layer by layer, quality by quality, the world reveals itself. The outline of the great conifers against the eastern sky, first as a general darkness against a slightly paler darkness, and then as a specificity, the individual branches becoming distinguishable, the needles not visible yet but implied by the texture of the outline. The cycads below the conifers, their fronds gradually developing from shapes to surfaces as the light finds sufficient angle to give them dimension. The fern bank where you have been all night, the individual fronds separating themselves from the general green mass as the light finds them. Everything has a particular colour in this light, the colour of things that are being revealed rather than displayed. The colour of the world in the act of showing itself, which is a different colour from the world when it is fully shown. Greys that carry undertones of green, greens that carry undertones of grey, the river's pale surface with its hint of the gold that will come when the sun itself clears the ridge, the sky's colour in the east, which has been moving through the spectrum with geological patience, arriving now at a blue so pale it is almost white, the blue of something very far away seen through a lot of air. The warmth arrives before the sun. This is one of the specific things about the Jurassic dawn, in this valley, at this time of year. The air that flows down from the forest on the higher ground to the west has been warmed by those slopes, which received yesterday's sun and have been releasing it through the night, and the current of that warm air reaches the valley floor in the first moments of the visible pre-dawn, and covers everything it touches with a gentleness that is almost tactile, warmth without light, the warmth of the earth's long memory of yesterday's sun. The sauropods are awake before the sun. You cannot see them from the fern bank, but you know they are there, beginning their methodical movement through the forest canopy. The sound of their feeding is distinct in the pre-dawn stillness, the crack and shift of branches accepting the weight of a head and neck, applying the patient leverage of an animal that has learned exactly how much force is required to bring down the quantity of vegetation each bite requires. The sound is rhythmic in a way that the forest's natural sounds are not rhythmic. It has the regularity of appetite, the consistency of a need being met. The stegosaur is also awake. You hear its slower movement in the tree ferns at the clearing's edge, the particular sound of something large and deliberate pushing through vegetation that yields. The stegosaur moves without urgency in the pre-dawn, the way it moves at all hours, as though it has made a permanent peace with the pace that its body requires and does not see the point of attempting anything faster. Its plates will warm as the sun rises, and by midday they will have absorbed enough thermal energy to sustain the animal through the cool of the following night. But now, in the pre-dawn, they are merely present, slightly darker in colour than they will be later, carrying the coolness of the long night in their broad surfaces. The transition between night and morning in the Jurassic carries a specific weight of silence before it fills with sound. There is a moment, brief but distinct, when the night sounds have diminished to their minimum and the dawn sounds have not yet reached their morning volume, when the valley holds the kind of quiet that feels full rather than empty, full of what is about to happen, full of the world gathering itself for the long project of the day the same way it gathered itself for the long project of the night, without effort, without announcement, simply by being what it is, and proceeding to do what it does. The moss on the stones along the river's edge has caught the dew of the night and holds it now in tiny drops that will catch the first light when the light arrives. The moss is one of the oldest forms of plant life in this place, a holdover from biological lineages that were already ancient before the first conifer grew tall enough to shade them. The moss does not compete with the conifers for light in the way that one might imagine. It lives in the spaces that the conifers leave, the shaded margins, the wet surfaces, the places where the larger competition for the canopy does not extend. The moss has been living in the margins of the world since before the world had the kind of margins the Jurassic has, and it will continue living in them long after the world has changed its margins entirely. The cold-blooded creatures of this valley are in their deepest stillness now, the hour before dawn being the coolest and therefore the quietest for them. The crocodilian at the river's edge has not moved since the late middle hours of the night. It is not sleeping in the way that warm-blooded animals sleep. It is simply waiting, in the way that cold-blooded animals wait, in a metabolic patience that has no equivalent in the faster biochemistries of the mammals. The crocodilian's heart beats slowly. Its lungs move with the minimum effort required to sustain the minimum needed. It is in this moment the very expression of biological economy, doing the least possible to maintain itself through the coolest hours so that it can do more when the warmth provides the energy for more. You have been in this valley through the full dark, through the firefly hours and the rain and the deepest dark of the small hours, and the first subtle lightening of the pre-dawn sky. The valley has shown you everything it shows in the dark, all its quiet versions of itself, all the ways it goes about its business when the light is not there to illuminate the going about. You know this valley differently than you would know it if you had only seen it in daylight. You know the sounds it makes in the various registers of dark. You know the temperature of it at different depths of the night. You know the way the river sounds change when the rain comes, and the way they return to their base state when the rain passes. This knowing is the particular knowledge of having been present through something, not the knowledge of having read about it or been told about it or seen an image of it. The direct knowledge that comes from being here, in this place, through the full duration of this one Jurassic night. The knowledge lives not in the mind as information, but in the body as experience, as the accumulated sensory memory of temperature and sound, and the quality of air at various hours. This is how all the creatures of this valley know it, not as information, as experience, as the repeated embodied knowledge of having been here before and having survived here before, and having found the valley adequate to the needs of survival every time. The light in the east has reached the colour that precedes gold, a pale, clear brightness that is not yet warm but that carries the promise of warmth in it, the way a cold morning can carry the promise of a warm afternoon in the quality of the light even when the temperature is still low. The pre-dawn brightness in the east has this quality, not warm yet, but promising. The world on the far side of the ridge is already in sunlight, already in the full warm morning of the Jurassic day, and the light from that world is now spilling over the ridge and beginning to fill the sky above you with its reflected promise. Soon, you are still warm. The fern bank has held the warmth of the night through its long arc, the accumulated warmth of the earth and the air together, and you have been held within that warmth through the dark hours and into this pre-dawn, and the warmth persists. The coming day will bring its own warmth, the direct and confident warmth of the Jurassic sun, but that warmth is still below the horizon. For now, the warmth is the warmth of the night releasing what it has been holding, as it always releases it in these first hours, in exchange for what the morning will provide. The first direct light of the sun arrives at the top of the eastern ridge, and works its way down the slope with a patience that mirrors the night's own patience in coming on. The shadows of the trees on the ridge stretch westward as the light finds them from behind, long thin shadows that point across the valley like slow indicators of the sun's position, shifting as the minutes pass and the angle changes. The forest on the ridge is lit from the side, which is the most revealing light there is for landscape, the light that finds the texture of things and makes it legible, the light that transforms a general green into the specific, complicated green of 10,000 individual trees, each catching the horizontal rays at their own particular angle, and then, as it always does, the light reaches the valley floor. It comes as a diagonal shaft through the first gap in the canopy to the east, and it lands on the river surface, and the river lights up. The silver of the pre-dawn river becomes gold in an instant that is not actually instant, but that feels instant, because the change is so complete. The Gold River in the morning light is one of the oldest sights in the world. Not this specific river, not this specific morning, but this specific quality. Water in early morning light. The thing the world does every day without fail, without exception, without the slightest alteration in the quality of its commitment to this daily event. The Jurassic morning is beginning. The day is coming in with its warmth and its light and its specific sounds. The day sounds that are different from the night sounds in every world that has been organized around the difference between day and night. The animals are adjusting. The river is lit. The canopy above is shifting from shadow to light in stages as the sun climbs. And you have been here through all of it, through the full dark of the night, and the small hours, and the fireflies and the rain, and the Allosaurus passing on the far bank, and the fungi glowing in the dead wood, and the small mammal in the roots, and the sauropods at the river at dawn, and all of it, the whole long Jurassic night from its beginning to its end. Rest now in this light. The morning is gentle at this hour. The sun still low enough that the light is warm rather than hot. The air still cool enough that the warmth of the light feels like a gift. The fern bank receives the light, the fronds catching it and translating it into their own green language, the green that is the Jurassic's most basic vocabulary, and you are here in it, warm and rested, having spent the night in one of the most ancient and patient places the world has ever been, having rested in the Jurassic the way everything that has ever lived in the Jurassic has rested, in the dark, in the warmth, in the sound of the river, and the insects and the forest breathing. If you are drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. The Jurassic morning has settled into its rhythm now. The river is fully lit. The canopy above is moving gently in the first thermal currents of the warming day. The sounds that belong to the morning, the feeding sounds of the sauropods, the bird calls in the upper canopy, the insects now operating in their day mode rather than their night mode, all of this surrounds you in the gentle, comprehensive way that morning sounds. Surround things in a world that has always been a morning world. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps us continue making more content. Anyways, see you in the next one. And now, as the morning settles, let this be the moment when you release everything that this night has offered you. Not by ending it, not by leaving it, but by letting it become the ground beneath sleep rather than the content of awareness. Let the river continue below. Let the forest continue on all sides. Let the morning do what the morning always does in this valley, which is arrive gently and fill the air with the promise of another Jurassic day. You are resting. You are completely resting. The body that has lain in the fern bank through the long night is heavy now, in the way that rested bodies are heavy, the heaviness of something that has let go completely, and found that letting go is comfortable, that the ground supports it, that the warmth supports it, that there is nothing required of it by the morning except this continued rest. Let the sauropods continue their feeding, let the stegosaur warm its plates in the morning sun, let the pterosaurs find their first thermals of the day and begin their long, effortless circles above the valley. Let the river continue its conversation with its stones. Let the insects continue. Let the fungi continue their slow, patient work in the dead wood. Let all of it continue, all of it, the whole vast and patient project of the Jurassic world, doing what the Jurassic world does, in the morning, in the warmth, in the light, and you rest. You rest within it. You rest as part of it. You rest in the way that everything in this world rests when it rests, completely and without reservation, and with the full support of the earth beneath and the air above, and the sound of the river, and the sound of the morning, and the warmth of the sun, on the fern fronds above your face. The morning is warm. The morning is quiet in the way that Jurassic mornings are quiet, not silent, but organized around a quietness, a calm that underlies all the sounds and gives them a place to exist without disturbing each other. The river, the insects, the birds in the canopy, the footsteps of the large animals somewhere in the forest, all of it organized around the calm, all of it carrying the calm the way the river carries the minerals it picks up from the stone, without effort, as a natural part of what it is. Let your breath slow. It is already slow. It has been slow for a while, hasn't it? The Jurassic night has done that. The long, dark, ancient, patient night has slowed your breath to the pace that the world moves at, which is slower than urgency, slower than impatience, slower than the pace of things that need to be somewhere by a certain time, the pace of ferns growing, the pace of rivers carrying stone to sea, the pace of a world that has been here for a very long time and is in no hurry to stop. Sleep. Or continue sleeping, if you have already arrived there. The river will be here, the ferns will be here, the morning will be here, patient and warm, doing what the morning has always done in this valley, which is simply be the morning. And you will be here, resting in the fern bank, in the light, in the warmth, in the ancient and uncomplicated peace of a world that has been practicing the art of mourning for longer than language has existed to describe it. The Jurassic holds you. The ancient earth holds you. The river sounds and the insect voices and the wind in the high canopy and the distant call of something large and gentle moving through the forest, all of it holds you. Warm, still, resting, home in the oldest way that home can mean anything. Sleep well. The night was long and good, and the morning is gentle, and the world is ancient, and there is nothing else. There is nothing else at all. If you like this video, let me know where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. I am always curious about that. And if you have a suggested topic, feel free to leave it in the comments.